This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
All right, everyone, let's do this. Thursday afternoon, another gorgeous day in southern Manitoba. Great to have you with us on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. I'm Andrew Hustler Paterson, along with Michael Remis, the CTO, back at our WST Command Center. We got another great show coming up for you. Lots to get to coming out of the playoffs in both the National Hockey League and the NBA. The Dogs were barking last night. Big upsets in both sports. We'll get to some of that. We'll be talking U.S. Open. They are on the course. Fog delay this morning was a bit of a buzzkill for anyone that got up early looking for forward to tee off, but had to wait about an extra 90 minutes. But they are on the course right now. Weather's getting nicer. Course is toughening up and should be a great day for round one action at the U.S. Open. And of course, with it being in Torrey Pines in California, with that delay, we're going to get a big chunk of primetime golf tonight for those of you that are catching us on the podcast on the way home. Shout out to everyone that's with us live on YouTube, joining us every day. And of course, everyone that's making us a part of their day, listening to us after the fact on their drive home via Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Do us a favor, especially on Apple Podcasts, if you can rate and review, throw a 5-star rating in there. Just a little blurb certainly helps us grow the channel. And everyone with us here on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Big thanks to our great family of sponsors: Royal Sports, the Nick and Nicky DQ, Not AutoCorp, Little Brown Jug Brewing, Breezy Bend Country Club, PolicyMe.com, Boston Pizza, Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge, Assiniboia Downs, and Cool Bet Canada. Let's get Michael Remis in here to begin the program. I do want to mention we've got a couple great guests. We will talk some hockey and much more with Ken Wiebe a little bit later on in the program. And with all the excitement about the return of the Canadian Football League, really looking forward to having Justin Dunk from 3 Down Nation join us in about 15 minutes or so. Remo, what's going on?
I'm here, ready to go. I'm just testing out this new poll feature on YouTube. People have been asking about polls, and I can just do them in the chat right now. Let me just bring myself in. Hey, how are you?
Hey, nice to see you.
The first poll I've ever did, I just wanted to test it out. Should we do more polls? 41 votes, 85% yes, 15% no. Who's voting no on that? Maybe they were just testing it out, but
maybe they're just not poll people.
Yeah, maybe they don't like polls. I don't know, but yeah, we can definitely do. I'm gonna end it now, but
the biggest poll right now in Manitoba is, of course, coming out of Steinbach, the manliest man contest, which continues. Shout out to Gitch. I believe he's with us in the chat right now. If you haven't already, get over to Steinbach Online and throw a little support behind our guy, Sean L. By far the best photo of everyone that entered in. And it's funny, Reem, I actually had a chance to talk with one of the fellows on, they called me, I think it was 107 Country in Steinbach. I'm not as familiar with many of the music stations, being a sports nerd that's been on sports radio for the last 10 years. But did have a good chance. I guess they'll be playing it tomorrow morning on the morning show, asking me my thoughts on the manliest man competition.
Oh, and?
Yeah, well, you'll have to listen to it to find out. And then a little bit of talk about the CFL and whatnot. But like you said, I mean, the manliest man, that's a dangerous topic to get into in 2021. I was surprised that they went. And again, I don't even know whether it was serious to begin with. But I think when you look at some of the photos, I think people actually are serious about trying to be the manliest of all men. You know what? Maybe we should blame Paul Maurice for all of this. You know, it's all this talk about men and being men, and he's a man. I think maybe that's what led to the Steinbach Online Manliest Man contest. It's from the coach of the Winnipeg Jets.
Do other hockey teams talk about being a man and gaining man strength as much as the Jets do? We had Cole Perfetti was talking about how he's, getting that man strength, and he played against men, and Pascal Vincent is talking about how, some of these guys are growing into men, and I don't know. I hear the Jets talk so much about being a man.
It's a man's game. It's a man's game. It's not for boys. You know what? You need to be it's time to man. You know where they get the saying "man up"? Well, that's from probably the National Hockey League.
Are other teams talking about like manning, like being a man as much as the Jets are?
I would say if we did a power poll of all team mentioning men throughout the season, the Jets are for sure in the top 10 percentile of the league.
Yeah.
But we cannot be for sure. I mean, all joking aside, I mean, it is important to have, fully developed men in your lineup, but we've seen this league get younger, and there'll be a lot of talk about young players on the Winnipeg Jets and in the organization as we go into this very interesting offseason. And we'll get to some of that with Ken Wiebe coming up a little bit later on. How about the Habs?
Yeah,
they did it last night. There will not be a sweep. There will not be the sweep on the way to the Stanley Cup Finals for the Vegas Golden Knights. I'll tell you what, Montreal, they get that first goal, and they're in a completely different hockey team. And, well, they're not different. They're exactly what we saw, in 4 games against the Jets and coming back against the Toronto Maple Leafs. But I have to say, Reem, I mean, we talked so much about the starts that had sometimes been problematic for Winnipeg. It hasn't been good for Vegas. I mean, Montreal was the better team for the first 12, 13 minutes of game number 1. And last night, I mean, they outshot them 12-4 and finally got rewarded with a couple goals. And I think the Leafs and the Winnipeg Jets will be more than happy to tell the Vegas Golden Knights that, not showing up for the first 10 minutes of the game and getting behind against the Montreal Canadiens, not a good way to try to grind through to the next round of playoff action.
Yeah, and I didn't even realize they played a game. All the talk on social media was about Jeff Petrie. We heard his hand in that camera hole in the Jet series. Who knows what kind of pain he was playing through, but it appeared to be a lot because everyone posting the GIF of his eyes, which were completely bloodshot. I know that his kids were joking that he was the villain and they were playing like superheroes. A lot of jokes going on, Huss, about being in Vegas and getting red bloodshot eyes.
Yeah, there were so many Vegas jokes.
I don't know if it was a reaction to medication or some speculating that they had to pop his finger back in and he broke some blood vessels from just being able to handle the pain. I don't know, but it was definitely weird, and it got me thinking, we saw the Montreal media's reaction to Mark Scheifele after the hit. I mean, what if Scheifele came out with eyes like that? I can only imagine. I mean, he's the number one villain in the NHL now. So we'll have to wait.
I mean,
and so Jeff, it was all, everyone was kind of joking about Jeff Petrie, but there wasn't really the outrage.
Yeah, well, no, for sure. I mean, I have a feeling that some of the wackos in the Montreal media that were suggesting that Mark Scheifele was on something weren't saying the same thing about Jeff Petrie. And listen, credit to Petrie for getting back in the lineup. I believe they said it was somehow related to his injury, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to do it. And regardless, he looked absolutely bizarre last night. And yes, you were right. If you took a look at social media and were just wondering what was happening in the Montreal Canadiens Vegas Golden Knights game, you wouldn't have seen goals. You wouldn't have seen hits. You would have seen 100 different pictures along with accompanying bad jokes about Jeff Petrie's double bloodshot eyes.
I'm happy to make a couple bad jokes, but he played. He got on the board. Good for Montreal. Carey Price. There was a couple sequences there where he made some unbelievable saves. In Vegas, I think it was Martinez thought he had scored at one point. Blake Wheeler knows that feeling pretty well, raising his hands in the air. So not the first time it's happened against Carey Price in the playoffs. So Vegas shouldn't feel too bad about that. But it was a packed crowd. A lot of people also talking about these intros that Vegas is doing for their games, just bringing it to another level. We saw it in the 2018. I think
they're so good.
You'd actually want to tune in early for a game, maybe the only time ever where you'd be like, oh, I got to see what's going on here. And what a great thing to have a franchise in Vegas and packed house there at is it T-Mobile Arena? There's too many arena names.
Yeah, T-Mobile. It's still T-Mobile Arena, I believe.
It's just the Jets one that changed, not every other
Canada
one.
Life Arena. Yeah, Canada Life Arena. I can't remember what it used to be called.
It's a center.
Yeah, it's centered. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, heck, I've been screwing up a lot of things lately. Yesterday, when we were talking about the CFL season, and I know we put out that clip that's got a lot of feedback, which is great. It just shows how excited a lot of people are to get CFL football back and get back out to the stadiums. But I, in the same clip, referred to the Bombers' home field correctly as IG Field, and then 15 seconds later called it Winnipeg Stadium. No idea where that came from. And also was trying to talk about capacities and said 50,000 fans instead of 50% of fans, which may have confused people. But at the end of the day, The idea was what was important in all of that rant. And that idea is that if we continue trending in the direction that we are and people continue to take up the vaccines, we're going to get to a spot where we can get back to 50% fans, hopefully in time for the opening game of the season. And then come Labor Day long weekend, 100% capacity is the goal as per the 4-3-2-1 great summer plan that we heard about last week. And of course, that would mean, by my calculations, Banjo Bowl, first time we could fill that stadium. And as I said yesterday on the program, Remis, I think every Bomber fan would love nothing more than that sold out game to be the time that we celebrate the 2019 champions before hopefully another classic game between the two great rivals in the Western Division, the Bombers and Riders.
Yeah, I've seen pictures on social media, people lining up. I know Benny, that's the Jets mascot, and Mickey Moose handing out some Jets swag to people in line. So we're getting there. We're getting close. This is pretty awesome. Well, Larry Bong says they should not call it a Policy Me Field.
Yes, Policy Me Field. We like it. Attaboy, Larry. Supporting the WST sponsors. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we will see. So we're getting there. And someone retweeted your little soliloquy there and wrote goosebumps. And I do get it. I mean, I get good. When I got my first shot, I was like just dreaming of being able to, do something like play hockey again, which I haven't played for a year. But we're not, we'll get there soon. So it's very exciting. We're going to be talking with Justin Dunk shortly about the upcoming CFL season. And that, because, we didn't have CFL last year. So we are looking forward to that.
Some great stuff, and shout out to everyone that's with us in the chat. Dallas Paul's giving a shout out to Steinbach. A Gitch is here. Yes, second place in the manliest man competition. Get there. Vote for Sean L. Shout out to Wayne Jones. Great to see Wayne here. Mark Sports Video as well. Jeff Kabilis. Now, there was somebody, Dennis Ferreira. Shout out to Dennis. How special. Put a live bet on Belgium once Denmark scored. Tied you a little $30. Well, nice work, Dennis. We'll get to the Euro in just a second. We've got one more game today, 2 in the books already. And Remis's mute button with a couple. Rod Brindamore just about to talk to that and mentioning that weed is legal, Hustler. Wow. Well aware of that, my friend. Remis's mute button. Well aware of that. All right. So listen, just before we get to Brindamore, Reem, Habs obviously a huge win. Series goes back tied. I don't think a lot of people saw that coming. Vegas was a massive, massive favorite in the series and still don't see a series line for that. Maybe the bookies a little shook about Montreal's big win last night. That being said, Tampa Bay seems to be in a much better spot than they were after losing game number 1. But I got to tell you, they are going to be going into about as hostile a building as we've seen since fans got back into any building. And that, of course, is the madness that's going on in the Nassau County Coliseum as the Islanders are back in the Final Four again.
Yeah, we had thought last series would maybe be the last game there, but it just keeps going on. They're opening that new arena soon. I've seen some pictures online. But Barry Trotz, can they keep this lockdown D? And they do have some, dynamic offensive players like Matt Barzal. So that's gonna be fun, a fun one tonight. And then also, got Vegas going back to Montreal. I don't know the number of fans, but they had a decent number. Was it 5,000 before? Maybe it'll be better. So 1-1 in each series. So could we see like dual 7 game? I think
I'm here for it.
Yeah.
I'm here for it. I mean, I think we haven't had a ton of great Game 7 action so far in the playoffs. I mean, we had the one in the Montreal and Toronto game, a few weeks ago. And I mean, there hasn't been a lot. Obviously, Vegas, Minnesota in the first round. But other than that, it's been quite, it's been a lot more, shorter series than we have longer ones. The other big story today, outside of the hockey, and we'll talk more about this with Ken coming up. Hot Rod the Bod has a 3-year extension in Carolina with the Hurricanes. And I know we talked yesterday after Gerard Gallant signed on with the Rangers that LeBron and some of the insiders said that that's probably a pretty good idea, that things seem like they're about done with Rod Brindamore in Carolina. But I wasn't entirely sure about that. I mean, Tom Dundon has a rep for being cheap when it comes to, non-player salaries. And I wasn't sure whether he were going to get something done. There certainly would have been incredible demand for Brindamore around the league. So I hope Rod got a nice raise because he certainly deserved it. Sounded like he was taking care of the assistants and some of the trainers with new deals for them too. Hell of a team player. But he really is the heartbeat of the Carolina Hurricanes. It's hard to imagine that team without Rod Brind'Amour behind the bench.
Yeah, I agree. Rod's been there for such a long time. They've had so much success. You want to keep that going. Last year they didn't go to the first round. This year, they keep getting matched up against those Boston last year. This year against Tampa, the team that's 18 million over the cap or whatever Dougie Hamilton said. So I like what Carolina is doing. I think they got the big free agent in Dougie Hamilton. We'll see where he goes. They've given him permission, but Rod. As a player, he was known as like the fittest guy, and I think he's a player. We saw that video that the guys on his team want to play for. They look up to. He's got a lot of that experience. So I'm a big Rod guy. So I like it for Carolina.
Brind'Amour is still in better shape than probably 85% of the National Hockey League. The guy's an absolute machine. It's incredible. And I'll tell you what, and I think a lot of the credit goes to the way the Canes sort of run their organization, the access they give to their social media people, and of course the success they've had on the ice through the playoffs. So people are really paying attention to what the Carolina Hurricanes are doing, because you don't see them a lot in the regular season. But man, you want to talk about goosebumps. Some of those speeches that Rod Brind'Amour has given to his team. You're just average Joe fan and you're ready to run through a wall after watching it. So listen, they're out. They had a real tough run, getting bounced by the Lightning, but I'll tell you what, the Hurricanes are on the come up, and a big part of their future stays put with a 3-year extension for head coach Rod Brind'Amour.
And I guess the other thing, Seattle and Ron Francis as the GM, they're still looking for a head coach. We thought maybe they'd hook up again. They're still going to be searching, so that's another one we're going to be watching for coaching vacancies.
Yeah, a couple big names off the board when it comes to the coaching carousel. I guess one that was potentially going to be in the mix, and Brind'Amour and Gerard Gallant, who had that great run with Canada at the World Championships, now officially the head coach of the New York Rangers. We'll talk some more hockey a little later on. We'll also get to the U.S. Open, round number 1, underway today at Torrey Pines, and Euro 2020. A couple games in the books from this morning. We had Denmark going up early over the Belgians. Belgium came back, tied it up as Dennis Vera won that bet, 2-1 for Belgium. And earlier today, mighty Ukraine. A lot of Ukrainians in the city area, I'm sure, pretty fired up. Ukraine got it done against North Macedonia. Big win and 3 points for the Ukrainians this afternoon. Netherlands back on the pitch, I believe, against Austria. We'll touch on that a little bit later on. We're going to talk some CFL in just a second with Justin Dunk of 3 Down Nation. Before we do that, we had a couple nice mentions of Policy Me in the chat for people that have been with us. PolicyMe.com, our newest sponsor, which is an online life insurance deal allowing Canadians to buy term life insurance in minutes, 100% online, and at the most affordable price. Listen, I don't need to tell you, the thought of buying life insurance is probably right up there with things like going to the dentist. But like going to the dentist, it's important and you need to do it, especially if you have a family, if you have loved ones, if you have investments in things like a house. What happens if something happens to you? You need to be able to pay those bills and take care of your loved ones. But the entire process has always sucked. Uncomfortable meetings, long periods of time to figure out if you're approved. Policy Me takes care of all of that online. You don't even have to talk to anyone in person. Affordable rates, averaging 10 to 20% lower than other insurers in Canada. You'll get an instant decision. Literally, you go to the website, 15 minutes, fire out a little bit of information, answer a few questions. You'll find out almost immediately instead of waiting weeks like most other companies. And most people don't even require a medical exam. And the bottom line is it's easy, it's straightforward, it's fast, it's online. What traditionally took weeks and involved confusing paperwork and insurance jargon now is done in about 15, about the time it takes to listen to one of our guests pop on Sports Talk Winnipeg. So go to PolicyMe.com. Do it. This is not something you want to procrastinate on. You'll find out what your options are. You'll find out what your rates are, and you can get it done and be able to sleep at night moving forward that you and your family are taken care of. PolicyMe.com. And when you're there, do us a favor. Make sure you tell them that you heard about them when you're asked via the podcast. Also, speaking of Euro, and we'll talk more a little later on, we fired out yesterday the incredible new Euro kits that we've got down at Royal Sports right now. Now, I'm going into Royal Sports to get some disc golf gear for the weekend. I had a friend that just went and picked up a bike. You can't get around that incredible new expanded fitness section or the camping gear they've got. But being a merch guy, especially around these big soccer tournaments, love going into Royal and seeing what they've got. You can see them there on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. France, Spain, Germany, Portugal, all the big teams of the Euro, as well as the top stars in the world from there. Home clubs, nowhere better to do that. And if you're into that stuff, maybe book a little bit extra of a time because you won't believe all the incredible stock they've got at Royal Sports, King Skates and Surf, 750 Pembina Highway. And you can also check the other spot in East Kildonan. And of course, Father's Day is coming up. Big shout out to Nick and Nikki DQ. It's blizzard season. I know you want to get a jump on that. I guess they got a Girl Guide cookie blizzard that's just out, along with the Kit Kat and the Drumstick, my favorite. But let's face it, it's about Dad this weekend. And I don't think that there's anything that could add to the festivities more than a DQ cake. All 4 locations have a ton in stock right now. The Northgate sells as many as almost anywhere in Canada. But you can pop by there, get it in person at any of the 4 Nick and Nikki DQs, Northgate, Niverville, Polo Park, or St. Anne's. And even easier, folks, do it in advance. Fire them a tweet or a message on Instagram at DQ Manitoba and give them a follow. You can get it all set up, hundreds of different kinds, or a custom one for Dad, and then pick it up at any of the 4 Nick and Nikki DQ locations. So get online. You can go to dqcakes.com if you want, but I'd suggest go to their Instagram page at DQ Manitoba and get ready and get Dad one of those delicious DQ cakes for Father's Day this weekend. All right, let's get to it. Anyone that's watched this show this week knows that I'm fired up. We got the good news on Monday, officially green light for the CFL season, and it is an absolute pleasure to welcome in the brains of 3 Down Nation, along with our pal John Hodge. It's Justin Dunk in on Winnipeg Sports Talk. JD, what's going on? It's great to have you on the program.
Same, Hustler, man. I'm jacked up for some football just like you, buddy.
Oh, yeah. You know what? It's been a great week. There's been a lot of really bad weeks, especially if you're involved or love the Canadian Football League like the two of us. But here we are. How are you feeling going into Monday? I mean, was this a slam dunk, or were you like me going, listen, considering everything that we've been through, I'm just going to couch it and wait till we hear what they say, but obviously hoping that we'd get some good news?
Well, I was hoping it would be the pun off my name, a slam dunk, as you said, but I was cautiously optimistic based on what I had heard around the league. And the reason I thought it was going to be a yes vote is because you heard about staffs mobilizing, not just the coaching staffs and the football operations, but behind the scenes, the medical staffs, the training staffs, the business. Been told to operate just as if the season was going to go ahead, Hustler. So to me, that's why I had a positive vibe going into it. But as you know, just like in a CFL game, it ain't over until it's over.
Well, and, you know, it officially was over when we found out that it was unanimous. I mean, you and the guys have been doing a great job, you know, throughout these past few months, updating fans and people around the league as to what you're hearing from the different markets. I mean, we know here in the prairies, I mean, people are fired up. They would have been, you know, at a game in February if, you know, they would have had it just because of where we're at, and everyone wants to see it. Welcome the Grey Cup champs back. But listen, Southern Ontario was a real, I mean, particularly Toronto, not really Hamilton as much, a real issue spot. What's the latest on the Argos situation right now? The future going forward for the Argos with their ownership group, and was there any question that they wanted to play this season?
I certainly think there was some question there, and it was fair. I will say, to balance it out a little bit before we kind of start bashing the Argos here, that Bill Manning was not a part of the player relations committee in 2020 when they tried to get the Hub City season off the ground in Winnipeg, but he joined the PRC, and the PRC is essentially the committee that the league has that starts the discussions with the players over the CBA. So they had to make amendments to it. So Bill Manning was on that at the end of 2020 and into 2021. So I certainly think that helped. But in reality, the big scope of things, as much as CFL people don't want to hear it, MLSE has much more other bigger pressing priorities that actually really generate, you know, millions of dollars of income. They have obviously the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Toronto Raptors right at the top. And then MLS, the Toronto FC team, has really, I think, overtaken the Argos in the market in terms of fan attendance. TV ratings is a much different story, but I do think they like having the Argos a part of their portfolio, but it's well down the list. Let's say, for example, the Leafs right now are paying Mike Babcock less to not coach for them than the entire, I should say, they're paying Mike Babcock more to not coach for them than the entire Argos salary cap. So it's way down the list for them. And I think what they view in terms of the XFL discussions is the opportunity for them to potentially actually make some money off the Canadian Football League. I will say overall, though, I still think whether it's MLSE or somebody else, that if you can get the crowd there, that it's possible to rejuvenate the Argos there. It just needs to be, and I think the league overall, kind of re-overhauled and be viewed as a cool league, not a minor league one.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. Let's just kind of move on to that because, I've been talking, about it here on the program for the last couple of days. And, it's impossible to talk about the CFL and the start of the season without speaking in the world we live in right now and everything that they've been through. And we knew it could have been a death knell for the league to go through another season not playing. Now that they are coming back, really just at the time when it seems like most provinces are going to be able to loosen restrictions and bring fans in, especially in some of the markets. Let's focus on Toronto. Let's focus on Montreal. I don't know. I'm optimistic that I think they might be able to get a whole bunch of new people that maybe would never have even considered going to a CFL game before. It wasn't really on their radar. Because, Justin, the fact of the matter is no one's been able to do anything for a year and a half. And, listen, It's going to be in the middle of summer, beautiful ballparks, outdoors. Listen, if it's marketed well, I do believe that I think there could be, at least an initial resurgence. And the hope would be that maybe you can turn some more people into regular fans, knowing what they've been missing out on all these years.
I agree, man. And to be quite honest, Hustler, just get Drake to go to the first Argos home game of the year. And people will flock there. I know it sounds silly. He's a Raptors ambassador, but just pay him whatever you got to get him there. Because in Toronto, for the uninitiated, where BMO Field sits just across the road is Budweiser Stage, where they have concert after concert after concert in the summer, and they're all sold out. So people are literally walking right by BMO Field, and you have this area of young people called Liberty Village that is right there, literally. Young kids looking to go out, have a good time, spend their money, probably buy a few brown pops and have a good night, right? It can be part of that. And I totally agree. Maybe people stop taking it for granted that it's right there. And potentially, we don't know what's going to go on exactly with the border, but it doesn't seem like people are in a rush to go and travel outside of the country. So maybe, as you said, if it's branded in a cool way, and I'm dead serious, man, get Drake there and the people will show up. Do it once. Show me, have a good time, put on an event, and make it not so much about the football. We know the football is great, but your average person just wants to have an entertaining time.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. To be honest, just speaking from personal experience here in Winnipeg, moving from the old stadium to IG Field, I'll give Wiebe Miller a ton of credit for this. He gets it as far as what the fan experience should be about. They didn't, like before, literally tailgating wasn't just discouraged. It was not allowed in most of the places around there. Very different story here in Winnipeg. And, I can tell you, my love, I'm a huge Chiefs fan. 25 years ago, I went down to Arrowhead and, there's 50,000 people grilling and having beers before the game. And I'm like, this is as good as the game is. And that sort of an entire game experience honestly was something I think the CFL was really missing for a long time. And certainly in Winnipeg, it's developing at. You go to Saskatchewan, you'll see some folks doing that. And the more and more you can expand the game day experience around the actual 60 minutes of football, to me, the more new people you'll get involved and the more people you'll expose to it. And I think once people do that and, go through a full day of having some fun with your friends beforehand, going and see a great game, they'll be like, that was awesome. Let's do that again. Or maybe let's become regulars.
Totally agree, man. And I've seen it in Hamilton. I'm a sports anchor there on the weekends at the TV station at CHCH. And when I talk to people at the station, to varying degrees, there's Ticats fans there. Diehards all the way down to the casual fan, and they'll say really the new setup at Tim Hortons Field that is kind of similar to what you mentioned Wiebe Miller has created at IG Field with the Rum Hut, that there's these areas. Now, it's going to have to be done safely with COVID around, obviously, but at Tim Hortons Field, you have these gathering areas. So you have all these different avenues for fans to enjoy the game. I referenced Ottawa a while ago in saying that it has become the place to be on a summer night in the nation's capital. and it becomes a part of your night, right? You're heading out for a good time with your friends. You can go out of the stadium and come back in there if you want to at halftime. And we all know that district they've created there around TD Place. So to me, that's what the CFL needs to embrace more and more. We know it's great football, but your average fan wants to have a great time and make it part of their night out. So you go and have dinner. Hey, they're playing some football beside you while you're hanging out with your friends, and then you continue on whatever places you're going to visit as the night hours go on.
Oh, Justin Dunk with us from 3 Down Nation, getting ready for CFL season. Kickoff is the 5th of August. Bombers and Ticats right here in the Peg at IG Field. You know, Dustin, just for today, I mean, just like with all the optimism going in, I'm not even going to bother getting into everything that we've been through with the future of the league going forward, because I think those are stories that will develop over the course of this season. We'll find out more. Because right now, really, the job is for every one of these teams to get back on. I mean, I know you speak with people around the league. Listen, they've been planning for this for really the last year plus to get back to business at some point. That being said, I can't imagine how much work there is to do from the teams, and not just football operations, but business operations, getting ready to host fans after not having games for, well, over a year and a half.
There's lots to do. Like you said, it's kind of going a mile a minute in front offices right now, because we had this pause and this lull where even people on the business side, and you mentioned it, Huss, that they haven't been up to speed, so to speak. So I think all of us, I mean, even us in the media, got to get used to having a season again, and that natural, let's say, flow of the week that we're used to is gone because we haven't had games around again. So, you know, talking to mostly coaches and players and football personnel people around the league, it's been really busy, just even trying to get the travel booked. And a lot of us think of, let's say, a general manager and Kyle Walters there in Winnipeg, for example, being this sexy position, but you have to deal with all of these things. And then now on top of it, you not only just have to worry about getting your guys there into Winnipeg and on proper flights and all the rest, but you got to make sure that the testing is followed and all of the safety protocols are down to a T so that you don't have COVID come in your building. So certainly lots to do.
Listen, for people listening on the podcast or joining us live on YouTube, if you're not already making 3 Down Nation a regular visit and make it part of your sports bookmarks, you should do that right now. It's certainly part of mine. And hey, listen, before we talk about the league as a whole, you've got an interesting piece up on the site. Bombers and Riders discussing joint practices during 2021 training camp. Tell us more about this, Justin. Sounds like there's the potential for mayhem.
Yeah, could be. Get all those frustrations out from the pandemic, man. So I do think it's something that is definitely being talked about right now. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I could see happening sort of later in July, right? We know training camp's going to start on July 10th. So after the teams have gotten back and had a few practices to get their football legs back under them, so to speak, that the sense that I get is it could take place from Regina. Don't hold me to that just yet, but we know the public health conditions are much more favorable. The Premier Scott Moe said he wants to have full capacity for the Riders' home opener on August 5th. So it makes a lot of sense that the Bombers could just hop on a bus, you know, travel 6 hours, old school style, go to Regina, and as you said, have a few dust-ups with the Riders before it counts.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I mean, just with the delays and the missed season, even a practice scrimmage between the Bombers and Riders would probably get people in both Manitoba and Saskatchewan ridiculously excited for something that's not even a preseason game. But hey, listen, I'm here for it. As far as the league goes itself, it's a unique situation here in Winnipeg. Of course, they won the Grey Cup. They were planning on trying to run it back with much of that same core, which is still intact a year later. I think Winnipeg might be the exception more than the rule. How different is this league going to look since the last time we saw most of these CFL teams on the field?
It could be vastly different, and that's because I think there's some potential surprise retirements to come. And even in training camp when we get there, I really think it's going to show through who's been working out this entire time and who hasn't, and who are the young guys that might emerge. So I think by the time we get on the field on August 5th, there could be a lot of turnover. And you mentioned it. Winnipeg has done a solid job of keeping their continuity there. Obviously, Paul LaPolice leaves on the offense, and that's a major storyline. And the Bombers, you know, arguably are still looking or would like a receiver to emerge as a legitimate let's say, CFL All-Star caliber receiver, but the rest of that defense is back. Zach Caleros is there, who provided great leadership, and of course, Andrew Harris as well. So I think in other pockets across the league, there are intriguing storylines. Everyone's kind of picking Ottawa to finish dead last, but it's never that easy in the CFL, Huss, right? It doesn't just play out that way.
No, it certainly doesn't. And I think that maybe this year more than any ever before, there's so much more intrigue and mystery because, I mean, even the players that we remember that might have been at their best in 2019, where are those players now? How did they weather during the pandemic? Now, I talked to Adam Bighill yesterday, and, you know, for a veteran like that, he said, I've never felt this good ever, just because it's been that long since he's been blowing guys up on the field. So there could be some benefits, but I do sort of have a feeling, Justin, that, you know, we'll get to the 7-game mark of this season, which will be midway of a 14-game year, and be looking at CFL leaders in a number of categories. And I wouldn't at all be surprised if there's a whole bunch of names that, as of right now, are far from household names, and many of them could even be new players to the Canadian Football League, because we know the talent factory that is U.S. college football. We know how important it is for jobs. We know there are some guys that maybe have moved on from football during the pandemic, which creates more opportunity for new, younger players to turn into CFL stars that we just don't know who they're going to be.
Totally agree. And the other note to sort of tie this together is that there are players that don't want to necessarily come out and put the paperwork in and say they're retiring because they might have to give some money back. So those players might just be surprise no-shows, let's say at training camp, go on the suspended list. And I'm all for it. Hey, players can get cut at any time, but they might just not show up, which might lead to more opportunities to what you're talking about for younger players to step up.
Justin Dunk with us here from 3 Down Nation talking CFL. What stood out to you about the schedule other than a Grey Cup rematch on opening night? What a great way to get things going.
Man, you have to love that. Maybe it's the quirks in there, right? And it's been a little bit talked about in Winnipeg that the Bombers don't face the Red Blacks and Paul Apolice and Matt Nichols. But looking at it more, Edmonton doesn't play BC in Edmonton, which I thought was kind of funky considering we're trying to keep the travel down or tapered as much as you can with COVID-19. The Red Blacks having some big games. Right? They got a Tuesday game, a couple of Wednesday games. Obviously, it's going to be tricky to put together because some of the dates might not be available at other stadiums, but those were what really stuck out to me most, Huss. And I'll say this, what I'm having a hard time understanding, and we mentioned the Bombers and Riders rivalry, we know how deep it runs. The Argos and the Ticats are playing 4 times. The Red Blacks and the Alouettes are playing 4 times because that's just a bus ride away, and it also saves money. Why aren't the Bombers and the Riders playing 4 times? I'd be real curious to ask Craig Reynolds that, or Wade Miller, or Trevor Hardy, the guy that makes a schedule at the league office, because I would have thought that would have been a chew-in.
Yeah, well, the bottom line was I looked, the first thing, we knew Knuckles had reported that it was going to be Bombers Ticats for game number 1, so it was quite easy to open up the schedule. Week 1, all right, check. The next thing that I think every Bomber fan did was quickly shoot down to that Labor Day weekend and make sure that Winnipeg was going to Saskatchewan, and then Saskatchewan was coming back here. And as I talked about yesterday on the program, I mean, you know, with where we are at right now with vaccinations and this plan that the government's put forward, that if we get the particular thresholds, the key dates are July long weekend, August long weekend being to get to 50% capacity, which would mean 50% for that opening game. But 100%, if the thresholds are met, would be Labor Day weekend. And that, of course, would mean, Justin, that the Banjo Bowl could be a full house. And Wade Miller said that they're not going to celebrate the 2019 championship until they can have a full house. There is absolutely no better scenario for Winnipeg fans than, you know, to invite a few friends from Saskatchewan to come in and watch that banner go up right before they go at it in a full house. And that atmosphere, like, to me, that is what the CFL needs to show around. I mean, you know, those games, when you have a full house with that sort of rivalry, the amount of fun that happens in the stadium before, during, and after, that to me is the highlight of the CFL year, really, those 2 weekends, at least for people here in the prairies. And man, if you could add in that Grey Cup celebration and the first official return to normalcy with the full house, to me, that is what would be, that's the perfect scenario right now for us going forward, at least here in this province.
Buddy, that would be awesome to see. And I totally agree with you. That Labor Day weekend is so special. And I think that's why my neck of the woods in Ontario, the Ticats wanted to host the Argos as their first home game, so they create that hype. And the Bombers looking to try to do that with their first full pack stadium. You almost wonder, is Wade Miller whispering in the ear of Brian Pallister and saying, maybe just hold off a little bit so the first one can time up with the Banjo Bowl?
Well, listen, I'm sure Wade would want to pack as many as he can soon. We all know what the situation of these clubs are in money-wise. But I'll tell you what, if that's the way it worked out, I think everyone around here would take it. At least we've got a bit of an idea, some goals to move forward to. And we're sort of behind everybody else. I mean, we're still essentially locked down right now. We don't have patios open or anything like that. So we're hoping that changes soon. And these will be things that we can look forward to. From a football standpoint, I know and you and John, all year have been talking about, the big stories in the league, but also about these teams going forward. How difficult is it this year as opposed to other years to sort of handicap, even give preseason power poll predictions because of the length of time these teams have been off and the uncertainty of really what the rosters are going to look like on opening night?
It could be real tricky, especially as you referenced earlier, if we have a bunch of young players that pop into prominent roles here. For me, when I look at that overall and trying to prognosticate, and we know it never really goes according to any of our picks, unless there's maybe some money down on it, maybe a better chance there. But overall, I look at the continuity, right? So I think in Winnipeg, you have a large core of that defense back and then kind of build out from there in the West. Calgary has all of their coaching staff back for the most part, of the major factors of it. And Bo Levi Mitchell's a quarterback. So we know that he's healthy. We know the Stamps are going to be a factor. That is a proven fact. I'm real curious to see how it comes together in Edmonton with Jamie Elizondo, a first-time head coach. Has a familiar face there, quarterback in Trevor Harris, but a new staff and a bunch of new pieces there. Same could be said in BC. You have Rick Campbell, who initially came in there, thought he was going to be the head coach, adds co-GM to his title. Neil McAvoy in that co-GM role as well. And Mike Riley, to be quite honest, with people saying around the league, well, it used to be if you had Riley, you knew you were making the playoffs right away. But the last couple of years, that hasn't happened for the franchises he's been with. So they need to show that they can bounce back. And out in Hamilton, I think along the similar lines as Winnipeg, they've kept the continuity as well in those key positions. Orlando Steinauer is still the head coach, Tommy Condell, the offensive coordinator, Mark Washington, the defensive coordinator, and they had the best offense and defense in the league in 2019. Whooped everyone in the regular season at 15-3, but we know what the Bombers did to them in the Grey Cup. So they have Jeremiah Masoli at quarterback and Dane Evans, and to me, that's going to be really intriguing to see how that plays out in 2021 and what it means for those guys in the future, because both of those quarterbacks in the last year of their deal, and I should quickly hit on Montreal as well. Vernon Adams is back, but an entirely new management staff around him with Danny Machoch as general manager, hitching his wagon to Vernon Adams Jr. Kahari Jones is still there, so you think the offense could stay intact. And then obviously everybody's curious what's going to happen in Ottawa and how much can Paul LaPolice change the direction of that franchise.
Yeah, the Lapo, I mean, just back to the schedule for a minute. That was the one unfortunate thing. There is no Ottawa-Winnipeg game. And to be honest, I mean, again, I said the minute the schedule came out that I will not complain about a damn thing with this schedule. Give me 14 games. It could be 14 games against the same bloody team. As long as there's games, we can go to it. Listen, considering what we've been through, I will take it. All that being said, did seem like maybe a bit of a missed opportunity for the league what a great storyline that would have been, whether it was the Bombers going to Ottawa or Ottawa coming here. Lapo, Matt Nichols, so synonymous with the Bombers. And of course that championship team, it is a little bit unfortunate, maybe a bit of a missed opportunity. But as I said, no complaints. We got a damn schedule. We've got games.
Totally agree, man. It's nice to be actually talking football instead of federal government, provincial government, local government, COVID-19, PPE, man. Back to football.
No doubt. Justin, one of the other things that you guys do a great job, and I really appreciate it as someone that's always, been a fan of and tried to support university football here in Canada, is you guys have done a great job following youth sports. What can you tell us and listeners right now about the prospect of the 3-down game amongst Canadian universities? How difficult or realistic will that be to get games in this season?
It does sound like Canada West in particular, the conference, obviously, of the University of Manitoba plays their football in there with the Bisons, is pretty confident in going ahead with their 6-game season. They have some contingency plans for shorter game season, maybe 2 or 4 to at least get the guys some film. But overall, I think they're really confident. Part of that has to do with, Saskatchewan doing a great job and reopening and what's going on in Alberta. So, if Winnipeg and BC catch up, then I'm pretty confident with that. The interesting part is when you kind of get to the Ontario Conference, to me, which is the major one. We had Lisa McLeod, the sport minister in the province of Ontario, come out and say there's a framework here for 18 teams, I believe it was, in 6 different sports or 18 leagues. But she did not mention the OUA, which, as we know, is a major generator of CFL talent, and U Sports is as well. I think it'll be fine out in Quebec, and those teams actually make money off their TV deal. And they've just announced the Vanier Cup will be hosted at Laval University on Saturday, December 4th. So to me, that shows that they're all systems go. And I think they feel like there's a safe way to do it. And the key is that at least the Canada West is planning to start later in September, when hopefully the vaccination rates are at a point where everybody feels safe and they can go ahead in a safe manner and keep the players healthy.
Yeah, any concept from people that you've talked to about how affected the teams are going to be, like at the U Sports level coming back? Will they lose a bunch of players? Will there be, I'm fascinated by how things look at that level as well, because we knew the stresses in some markets to put teams on. We know about the numbers of football players that are kind of coming in as a smaller number than it was sort of 10 years ago. I'm very interested as to just the health of the 3-down game at the university level when they do end up getting back on the field.
Well, I can say for sure in Ontario that the athletic departments were hit pretty hard without football being on the field, right? That's a big revenue generator for them. As much as it's not packed 100,000 seat stadiums like we see in the NCAA, they still generate revenue from that with the ticket sales, especially the universities. Let's say that, I'm close to covering in Hamilton on a weekly basis with McMaster. That new stadium gets a solid amount of fans in there and drives revenue for the university. So they'll have to bounce back from that. I'm not getting the sense that we'll have, quote, like the star players moving away from football, because they feel like, hey, if I can just get 1 year of film under my belt, that can boost my CFL draft stock and give me an opportunity to go forward.
JD, this has been a lot of fun. Great to see what you and our guy John Hodge are doing at 3-Down Nation. Fill people in on where they can find you guys and what you guys have coming up over the next week or two now that it's all systems go for a CFL season.
Yes, man. Well, honestly, appreciate the kind words. 3downnation.com. We track everything that's noteworthy in the CFL, try to break as much news as we can there as well. And you can follow us on Twitter at 3downnation. I'm at JDunk12. Hodge, I believe, is at John D. Hodge, sorry. So you can get us up there. And honestly, it's really cool to see what you guys have done over there. And I think very much like you're going to do, we'll be covering the CFL every step of the way, largely in written form, but we still have the weekly podcast as well, the 3-Down Nation pod that I do with John, and try to get some inside perspective on the league that, maybe you can't find anywhere else.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is a real pleasure having you on the program, and we'll have a spot for you all season long if you and John are able to come by. This was great, and we can tell you there's a lot of people in our chat, listening on the podcast, and just in this area that cannot wait to get back on the field on August 5th with the Ticats coming here. Let's do this again soon, Justin. Thanks for coming by.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you, Huss.
Right on. There's Justin Dunk at JDunk12. 3downnation.com is the site. We are going to get to some hockey talk with the notorious Ken Wiebe coming up in just a moment. Do want to shout out our friends at Not Autocorp. Man, the weather, this is great driving weather. Although, frankly, it's been driving weather for the last 18 months because that's one thing we've been able to do safely during the pandemic. But if you're thinking about maybe upgrading the ride, no better place to do that than Not Autocorp. An incredible selection of vehicles, including the most Teslas in Manitoba. They've been doing Teslas for 7-8 years over at Not. Why not get into the car of your dreams at a great place with the Not team? And if you're in a lease or you've got another vehicle, talk to them about their consignment program to get you max value for your present vehicle as you move into a new one. They'll also fix your car, got Red Seal technicians, body shop detailing, all there at Not Autocorp. Check them out at Waverly and McGillivray or online at not.ca. And, the response for the Father's Day basket from Little Brown Jug was incredible. Unfortunately, pre-sales are over, but that doesn't mean that Dad does not deserve one of these delicious summer, the summer lager, potentially the Hefeweizen, or the flagship brand, the 1919. And well, the Father's Day pack not available right now. They do have the product that turns the beer into a delicious radler, and they've got great merchandise as well that maybe Dad would like. And listen, the tap house isn't open right now. We're gonna need to wait a little bit to have those 1919s and beers on the patio on the William Avenue, but right now it's easier than ever. You don't even need to leave your house. Littlebrownjug.ca. Get online, home delivery. They'll get it right to you. That's what Dad wants for Father's Day. Trust me, littlebrownjug.ca. And a big shout out to Breezy Bend Country Club. I do believe our next guest happened to be there earlier today. We'll check in on the course with Ken, but right now checking out the leaderboard at the U.S. Open. It's Russell Henry and my man Brooks Koepka, 3 under par, just getting into the back 9. Tommy Fleetwood, Xander Schauffele also at 2 under. A couple Italians at 1 under, Francesco Molinari and Guido Migliozzi. A lot of people were on Guido. I think Feinberg touted him going into the event. So I know Toth and Pasechnik were just tweeting me about Guido. They're all fired up that he's having a nice start. TSN's got coverage, and we're going to go well into the night because, of course, there was a 90-minute fog delay this morning. So it's going to be a fun day for golf watchers. We should be having live action till about 10 o'clock our time. Big thanks to Breezy Bend. And speaking of Breezy Bend, let's bring in one of the most recent athletes to take on Breezy Bend, and that's Ken Wiebe. Ken, how was the round this morning?
Huss, fantastic round. Thank you for asking. Course is in amazing shape. There are 2 projects that are underway, are really coming along nicely. And I was just talking with Corey Johnson at the course, along with Chris Innes as well. Man, number 5 green you would never know it's the newest green on the course. It's running so pure. The greens are fantastic. Course is in great shape. And it was just a beautiful day to be out on the course. That's for sure.
You know, you have already got into your annual Manitoba golf tour and been bouncing around. I would imagine that the weather that we've had and the fact that, you know, the courses weren't busy for a few weeks while we all had to stay home, even for something like golfing, has probably given the superintendents around here, especially Craig, who's better than anyone over at Breezy, the chance to get these courses as minty as you'll ever see.
Yeah, for sure. The fairways all over the place are really playing really well, and the greens. The other, I guess, one of the few benefits for the courses themselves, obviously you want the revenue and you want people playing all the time, but because there has not been nearly as much traffic, you'd be able to get a few more things done around the course that you wouldn't normally have the opportunity to do so. And nice to finally get that rain as well, has to kind of green some things up all around the province. And we know there's so many great tracks everywhere. It's just great to see people back and able to play foursomes and get out in time for Father's Day and those things. But it should be a great summer ahead on the golf front. The golf tour did get a little bit of work this week for sure. Got over to the Flying Golf Club and to Netley Creek for the first time also. A couple of fun rural tracks under the belt already.
Now, I couldn't help but notice that you and Rennie are like really like you are basically are now YouTubers like us, like gung-ho, always on YouTube. Yeah. The party didn't stop at the end of the Jets season. You guys should keep going. I mean, I'm 11:30 last night. I'm screwing around. I'm like, what the heck? These guys are on a post-game show after Vegas. I mean, just getting the reps in. What's going on?
Yeah, Huss, I mean, a little bit of experimentation because the season ended off so well in terms of the engagement level. We wanted to just sort of see if we could tap into a couple of other markets. And for those Jets fans who are still in, we know there's a lot of, still some lingering disappointment, but for those fans who have their eyes on the Final Four, we figured we know that Vegas has so many Manitoba connections, and we also know that Montreal is obviously the last Canadian team standing out of the North Division. So we wanted to do a little bit of experimentation and a test run. And it's been great to see. I mean, we saw a nice bump from game 2 compared to game 1. And as you said, I mean, when the games are when our show's only going on at 11:30, it's tough to keep some people up that late. But as you know, I mean, whether it's podcast or
tough to keep you guys up that late.
Well, hey, I mean, I don't sleep much, so I'm happy to talk about hockey. We're all watching the games anyway, so good to have a place to be able to chat about the games. And what a response by the Montreal Canadiens. I know that whole North Division sucks narrative got tossed right out the window pretty quickly yesterday. And I mean, that's just, if you make the Final Four, you've got a good hockey team, right? I mean, we know that there's a huge difference between Montreal with the lead and Montreal chasing the game because they aren't as offensive. But the Canadians have a good team. They have a good 4-line team. They didn't get here by accident. They have an elite level goaltender. They have, when Jeff Petrie is back in the lineup, as we saw yesterday, their top 4 is as good as anyone's in the league in terms of their size and ability to move the puck and those sorts of things. They kept that front of the paint a lot cleaner than they did in game 1. And then some of their offense got going again. And man, fourth line, we talked about so much in that Jet series. They were quiet in game 1, not necessarily through any fault of their own, but because of all the penalties. But with ex-Jet Yoel Armia getting that first goal, Corey Perry getting his nose dirty around the crease area again, and Manitoba and Joel Edmondson having another big game with 2 assists. I mean, the Canadians bounced back with some fury. For sure, Vegas played great in the second and third, but 2 great starts in a row for Montreal. This time they got a bounce and they got a little momentum from that. And hey, numbers speak for themselves. 9-1 when scoring first. We know it's a different game when they get the lead. And I love the game from Nick Suzuki. I know he's a guy we talked a lot about all year long. And man, what a great showing from the youngster who really is kind of enjoying the moment of having to go up against a team as deep as the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Now, listen, I'm going to say we will talk Jets, and I'm going to try not to keep bringing everything back to the Montreal-Winnipeg series. Despite,
it's okay,
just hearing about this, I'm like, well, let's talk about the starts. And again, I promise I will not refer to the Jets starts in that series against Montreal. But for a team
Huss, you have the same reaction that Mark Stone had after the game last night when it comes to the starts.
Yeah, well, I mean, Montreal, a big part of getting up in these games is the way that they come out every night. And listen, we haven't seen it from a number of playoff teams, certainly one from Winnipeg, but Vegas too. I mean, game number 1, Vegas over 60 minutes were certainly better. But I mean, again, Montreal came out. I thought for the first 12, 13 minutes, they really controlled the play and, were doing what they wanted to do. And then last night they did exactly that, maybe even better. Certainly Vegas didn't look like they were at their top, but they took advantage of it. And sure enough, I mean, it reminded me a lot of some games earlier in the playoffs where, Montreal gets up a couple goals and, good luck beating Carey Price 3 or 4 times to win a game. He just doesn't lose when he gets that sort of run support.
Yeah, no doubt about that, Hassan. I mean, Jeff Petrie's ability to come out of the bullpen for game 2 with the crazy-looking glove and the Terminator eyes. I mean, he just provided so much stability on that back end. I mean, playing just under 21 minutes, got an important assist, but just the calmness that he brings that sort of level of calmness that Paul Stastny brings to the Winnipeg Jets, Huss, in terms of being that veteran presence. He's mobile, he's physical, he's active. He's a great passer. He's a good reader of the play, and just really helped them get stabilized. And I mean, Shea Weber, another guy who's playing with injured hands or thumb or whatever it is, blocking shots right up to the last second of the game. I mean, he had a great game. Ben Sherrod, another solid effort. And again, Joel Edmondson, pounded from behind by William Karlsson. And Huss, I know we don't want to get onto the officiating, ranting and raving, but that's got to be boring. Like, come on. Like, the guy, you plant the guy's face into the glass late in the game, you got to call that. But I mean, Edmondson is fine with taking the hit to make the play, but come on, like that's got to be a penalty. But regardless, Montreal, great job of getting their 4th line involved. Again, we also know that their 3rd line needed to be a lot better. Kotkaniemi, Anderson, and Paul Byron, who hadn't scored in 12 games. What does he do? Goes out and gets the GWG on a nifty looking backhand roof job. Fleury could not get the poke check in time. And one of the underlying themes of that play, Josh Anderson wins the battle with Nick Holden along the wall. Won't get an assist on the play, but if he doesn't win that battle, the puck doesn't get through, Byron doesn't get the breakaway, and the goal doesn't happen. So Montreal doing those little things, even as something as the head fake by Caulfield. Yes, the Toffoli shot is not a rocket, and it kind of slides through, but that play is all Petrie patience at the top. Suzuki wins the draw, no point on the play, but he wins the draw. Caulfield just makes this ridiculous head fake, gets it into the slot. Toffoli, there you go, 8-game point streak. It was such an important response for Montreal after the way that Vegas played so well in the second and third in game 1 that a lot of the experts were saying, well, this is going to be a sweep. We knew that probably wasn't going to be the case. And we know that Vegas was missing Chandler Stevenson, and that changed their game quite a bit. But man, what an effort by the Manitoba product, Keegan Colasar last night.
I wanted to bring Colasar up. I mean, he has been, and you know, I think a lot of people, like, there's so many Manitobans on Vegas. He's been a guy, and listen, he hasn't been an everyday player really up until this point, and he's taken advantage of the opportunity with the injuries in the lineup, but a really, really great story. And we heard him talking about Chuck Pete yesterday.
Exactly.
John Morosi. I mean, there's a lot of people that just know, I think he might be from Winnipeg. Fill the listeners in on the pretty interesting story and journey to the National Hockey League and the Vegas Golden Knights for Keegan Colasar.
Yeah, and just such an exceptional human being, Huss. I mean, this is a guy that I covered a bit in junior, covered him when he was drafted. And for me, there is that interesting connection because I covered Charles when he was with the Winnipeg Goldeyes. Here's a guy who is just an exceptional talent, a legit five-tool player, legit high-end prospect, major league prospect, just did so many things well. Five-tool player, you know, hit for average, hit for power, field, run, throw, catch. Like, he was just such an incredible person. He loved the game so much. And the beauty of Keegan talking about how, you know, even as late as last year before he passed away, he wasn't really even sure what icing was, but he knew that he was there to support his son in every way that he could. Such a great sounding board for Keegan to have in his life, a guy who did so many things around the game, then stayed involved in the game that he loved and was just so passionate. And that's the thing, you know, Keegan is such a polite individual, but he has so much passion for the sport and his great family support as well. And man, this is a guy who is a legit power forward, big, strong guy with hands, and he's playing out of position. I mean, he's not a centerman naturally. He's a big, burly winger who played with Matt Barzal, but yesterday doing such an incredible job with two of the smartest players in the NHL, and Mark Stone and Max Pacioretty. Who's the guy digging out the puck in the corner? Colasar. Who's getting in on the forecheck? Colasar. Not a lot of players can go from a fourth line role to a third line role to a top line role and not look out of place. I thought that Keegan was excellent. He can use his body physically. He's a good skater for his size, and he's got really soft mitts around the net. Like, this is a guy that's going to be scoring double digits in goals when he really gets rolling and feels even more comfortable. And every game that he plays in the Stanley Cup playoffs is another step towards him being not just a regular Huss, but an impact player at the National Hockey League level.
Ken Wiebe with us here. Kenny and Rennie, Sportsnet. You're quite familiar with his work, I'm sure. I just got to give a quick shout out to Pat Kanuga in the chat. Pat says WST episode number 75 tomorrow. It's your Diamond Jubilee edition, Hassan Remis. I will toast you with a Little Brown Jug 1919 while chomping a DQ burger and thinking of buying a not Tesla one day. Well done, gents. Pat, you're the man. Tune in tomorrow. And tomorrow,
that's straight fire.
I was not aware that it was the Diamond Jubilee edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk tomorrow, but I can tell you that we've got quite a diamond of a guest in Jim Toth joining us tomorrow.
Nice.
So we'll have
every day is a new milestone in what we're doing right now. Every day is a new milestone. Keep the subs, keep the smashing that like button, keep subscribing, keep the views rolling, folks. This is
swipe up.
Fertile ground for all of us, and it's just been a lot of fun to be in. That's for sure.
Well, it has. Listen, before we move on, Mark Stone. Listen, I know he wasn't too pleased with the way the team played. They came out yesterday, but I know there was a lot of people wondering, like, you know, Vegas, everyone kind of knew, or it was quite widely speculated, shall we say, that he was going to go to Vegas as a free agent anyways. They thought they had a chance to win, so they go and, you know, paid some significant assets to get him, signed him to the long-term deal at big money. But man, this guy is worth every single penny, Ken.
Unreal. And just for the facial expressions alone, I mean,
he's the best.
Mark I love the way he wears his for a guy who is not a rambunctious or a boisterous interview. He shows so much great. Nobody sellies harder in the NHL than Mark Stone, and not just for himself. He's the guy that is fired up for anyone who puts the puck in the back of the net. I love how animated Mark gets, and I love the way that he's playing. I mean, He's got such great chemistry with Max Pacioretty, the things that they are able to accomplish on the ice. The other part about Mark Stone has his ability to be such a complete player. Nobody's better in the NHL at takeaways. His ability to back pressure as a high-end offensive talent. He's just such a great two-way winger. I think he's the best two-way winger in the National Hockey League. And I love the fact that all the people, what was always the knock? Well, not a very fluid skater. Well, how many puck races does Mark Stone lose? Like almost zero, because his anticipation level is so high and his ability to be in the right place at the right time and win the race. I mean, just like the overtime winner. I mean, that there was nobody catching Mark Stone, who apparently isn't a very fast skater, according to some, but I love the way that he's handled the captaincy. He's really embraced that role. He is, I mean, yes, we know Marc-Andre Fleury is the face of the franchise, but Mark Stone is the heartbeat of the Vegas Golden Knights. And I think he's going to continue to play a big role as this series moves along. He's playing great hockey. And you know that when he gets upset and is disappointed, he's going to have another big effort coming up. I think that as well as Kolesar played, I think that the way that it impacted the rest of their lineup really kind of hurt Vegas. Nicholas Waugh, who is a really good, versatile player, didn't really get things going on either one of his lines, whether he started up top and then went back to his line. Alex Tuch is flying in this series. And here's a guy who's a top 6 player on almost every team in the National Hockey League. When Alex Tuch's on a third line for a team, you have a really talented roster and a deep roster. I know that the Misfits line got going late and kind of set up the Pietrangelo second goal, but I didn't think their line was very good last night. Marchessault and Riley Smith were not as active, at least until the third period. No shots until about 12 minutes to go. And then Wild Bill got the great chance, but the puck rolled off his stick, right? So he got this great burst, but he didn't really get as solid a scoring chance as you'd be used to seeing. I expect that line to be much better in Game 3 on Friday night. They would have heard about it a little bit, and they're kind of, I mean, we saw Marchessault in that series in 2018. These guys nobody's harder on themselves than themselves. I expect them to bounce back really well. Pietrangelo, probably one of the best players on the ice in the game for the first 2 games. Theodore was a little bit quieter, I thought, last night, but man, and Alec Martinez, like, what a series he's having. And Huss, I love what Price said about using all of his extremities to make that save on the back door. I don't foresee an opportunity where that shot hits him in that spot and doesn't end up in the back of the net again. There was a little bit of wizardry and sorcery going on that one off the back of the pants. I still have no idea how it went out of play.
Good to be lucky and lucky to be good, Weaver. Isn't that what they say?
That's not a knock. Price has been exceptional in the series, and Fleury's been awesome too. And I loved three questions in a row to Stone. Fleury was ready to walk off the podium, but still gave a great answer about going back to Montreal, going back to Quebec, how great it will be with 3,500. I love how Fleury, Connor Hellebuck did a great job of compartmentalizing his approach in the interviews. Fleury's the same way. I mean, it was early on, it's not me versus Carey. I'm just taking care of my crease, all of those things. 2 exceptional goalies. And I mean, let's not kid ourselves, Huss. This is a legit Olympic battle between the guys who could be the starter, right? I mean, there are some other people in the equation, sure. But right now, these 2 guys are basically going head to head. And this won't determine necessarily.
There's no one else even in the conversation for Canada for the Olympics next year. I mean,
some people want Binnington in the conversation because of hang on, just because of the connection to Doug. I think that there's nobody in the conversation for the number one.
Because he's buddies or he plays for the guy. Listen,
no, Huss, I'm with you. I want to see Fleury or Price as the starter for Team Canada, but man, what a great battle this is. And the way that Fleury is, I mean, both those guys are playing great, but I love you got the great contrast, right? You got the stoic Carey Price and you have like Mr. Animation and Mr. Happy Fleury. I think there's such a good combination platter there. I think you can go into a situation where you wouldn't have to, you could even legitimately go into a load management 50-50 split. Fleury's handled the split really well. And now too, I mean, Price, it was more injury related, but I think you could go in with legit a 1A and a 1B and be in a great situation where you can turn to either guy. And then sure, once you get to the playoff round, yes, of course you have to make a choice. But I think that those 2 guys have got to be the front runners for Team Canada's starting job.
Well, front runners, yeah. I mean, as I said, I don't even think there's anyone else that's even in the running. I mean, I think it's a 2-man, and it's kind of neat. I still do think, and I know there's some people in the chat. I mean, they think that Carey Price is going to be the guy regardless of how this series ends up. And I think based on history, he probably has a bit of a leg up, but how they're playing next year will impact in that. And to your point, I mean, I think you're exactly right. I think if you have veteran goalies like that have done it at every level, you're confident that they can have a night off. They're not worried about losing their job if they're not starting. I mean, they're all in. And to me, that third goaltending spot, I think essentially next year you go in. I mean, before we kind of thought it was Carter Hart, and then he had that disaster. Well, that's what I'm saying. I just think, I mean, if I'm Hockey Canada, I want Price, I want Fleury. I think that's a done deal. And then I want a young goalie for the future that can benefit from being on the team because, let's face it, if Canada gets to their third goalie, that probably means we're in trouble.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I still think Carter Hart's a great candidate for a bounce back season. We know he's had great success with Hockey Canada before, and I would expect him to have a really solid summer and get himself in a really good headspace to really make an impact. And he's the kind of guy that would want to be involved, and he wouldn't see that as a demotion to be the third guy with those two goalies. He would see that as such a great learning opportunity to be around those two, real legitimate stars, veteran guys who have so much knowledge and have endured. I mean, let's not forget what Fleury has endured in his career. Everything from the shot off the back of Braden Coburn to losing his starting job last year, and now to be getting your first Vezina candidacy as a finalist in 8 months after losing your starting job. That tells you all you need to know about the character and the work ethic of Marc-Andre Fleury, who's just been absolutely fantastic. And if you look at the names that he's associated with those 90 playoff wins, it's some pretty elite company when you're looking at a career in terms of getting it done when it matters most.
Ken Wiebe's with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Hey, listen, you brought up the Olympics, and I'm going to kind of transition this now to the Winnipeg Jets. But let me ask you this. I mean, as we sit here today, in June, Jets season over, let's play the percentage game. Give me the Ken Wiebe percentage on the chance that Mark Scheifele is on Team Canada.
Yeah, I'd still go pretty high, Huss. I'd go in the 75 to 80 range. And
wow, really?
I feel very confident in Mark Scheifele's ability to. He's a very motivated individual as it is, Huss. And if you look at his last two playoffs, so one of them ending with an injury and another ending with a suspension.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's face it. This was
sure.
This was talked about all around. And listen, Winnipeg Jet fans for the most part have Mark Scheifele's back. Outside of the perimeter of this city, Mark Scheifele has been getting killed. His both by the media and a number of people in the league. Does this affect at all his standing when it comes to that, do you think?
Yeah, I've seen that theory out there, that narrative, Huss, but I think his body of work would outweigh any of the negatives on that front. If there was any, guilty by association or whatever term you want to use. I think that Mark Scheifele is a player who has established himself to be a pretty high-level player for a long time. 5 years as a point-a-game player, Huss, and his playoff record is pretty impressive as well. Although obviously frustrating for him, he's only played a game and less than a period in the last 2 years, when it would be prime real estate for him to be bolstering his playoff reputation as a high-end performer. But I expect Mark to have an outstanding summer. I know he kind of shied away from the public comments about what it would actually mean to him, but Huss, you and I know what it means to Mark Scheifele. Mark Scheifele lives to play for the Maple Leaf. I expect him to have an exceptional summer. His motivation level is already at extremely high level. And after encountering this, challenging circumstance, and I think there's nothing but fuel for Mark to come out with just an explosion out of the gate when he gets into the lineup and to do everything in his power to be on that team. Yeah, for me, I look at it this way, Huss. I think he's in the top 12 in terms of the forwards, but even at worst, Scheifele would be in that, 13th forward power play specialist kind of game kind of breaker that could start as the 13th forward and end on the top line, kind of like a la Jonathan Taves variety pack in 2010 for me. That's how I see Mark Scheifele. I mean, I'm not comparing them directly as players. I'm saying that even if you didn't have him in the top 6, you could have him as that, power play specialist that could work his way up into the lineup. I mean, of course, there's a lot of great players out there, and is it a lead pipe lock? Well, nothing is right now, but I expect Mark Scheifele to be on that team. He has a very solid reputation around the league. The people making those decisions know what kind of person he is. So yes, I mean, this is you call it a blemish on his record or call it whatever you want to call it. It was something we certainly were not anticipating happening. I think, we've talked about this. I think 4 games was probably a little excessive in terms of the length of the suspension, but at the same time, I think it will do nothing but fuel Mark and serve as a motivating force for him to go out and grab that goal, which we know is very important to him.
No, listen, I completely agree about that. I mean, I think he wants this as much as anything. And I think he realizes that it's a dogfight. I mean, he's not in a position where, something drastic would happen for him not to make the team. I mean, there's that many great players from Canada. And, I'm probably more in the 40 to 50% range. Okay. Maybe I'll say 45. And the reason for that is, although I will, maybe I'll go to 50 because I think your point on being like a 13th, 14th forward, he is a player that if somebody gets hurt, I mean, he can go in and, replace a player in that top 9 in a scoring role. My worry for Scheif from his perspective when it comes to, if he's going to be on the team as a 4th liner, we hear coaches talk about roles often. And listen, it happens in the National Hockey. It happens with Hockey Canada as well. And you wonder whether, a Couturier or someone like that, with the way that he plays, the defensive acumen, if that might be the preferred player that would at least be in that role. Because, when you stack up the centers and the other centers that'll move to the wing, it's not a knock on Mark Scheifele. It's just a very crowded room with a lot of elite hockey players.
No, you're right, Huss. And to me, I'll break it down a little bit further. Because of his connection, like I think about the Olympics and how it was a challenge to find people to play with Crosby, right? Which seems like it's a ridiculous argument to be having, but there was a reason Chris Kunitz was on the one Olympic team, right? To me, Scheifele's ability to play with a Connor McDavid or a Nathan MacKinnon at the World Cup, that will be something that is taken into consideration by Team Canada, knowing that he can play center, he can play right wing, he's a power play specialist, has a great shot, versatility. For me, this would be such a critical moment for Mark Scheifele's career. He needs to have his Dale Hawerchuk moment. He needs to have his Dale Hawerchuk at the Canada Cup in '87 moment where he's in a room constantly with MacKinnon, Crosby, McDavid, all of the elite. We know he's a top 10 scorer. For Mark to take that next level as an all-around player, I think the internal push from being around those kind of people and people that have already won the Stanley Cup, and then a person like MacKinnon who, speaking of fuel and motivation, how motivated do you think Nathan MacKinnon is? We haven't won what in my 9 years. I mean, man, if I were Mark Scheifele, I'd go out and spend a couple weeks in Cole Harbour in terms of the training path this summer, because that's another highly motivated individual. And I think that you could see those two guys playing as line mates at some point. And I really think that internal motivation from both of those guys and sort of that want to win. And we know how disappointed Scheifele was when the NHL did not go to the Olympics last time, when he probably would have been a lock. So to me, I think that he's going to do everything in his power to have an exceptional start and to give Hockey Canada no choice but to have him on that team.
All right, great stuff. I have a feeling this is the first of many discussions we're going to be having on this Canadian Olympic team going into next year. That being said, we haven't spoke on this program since the end of the Winnipeg Jets playoffs to 10 days ago now. I don't know about you. I mean, I've tried to go back and rewatch some of those games, as painful and ugly as it was. And you got a good perspective on this. What happened to the Jets in that series? I mean, now that we've kind of, the shock of everything happened, the Scheifele incident, the way it was. I mean, what can you make any sense of how the Jets bowed out the way that they did?
Sure, Huss. I mean, I've loved listening to you talk about the rewatching during the last 10. Sorry, and I'm not taking any. I
don't know why I do this to myself, to be honest with you.
I'm not taking any enjoyment in your agony, but in terms of your descriptive nature is what I've enjoyed a lot when it comes to that. I would draw a little parallel to what we saw in Game 1 and how different Montreal looked without Petrie in the lineup. And I'm not comparing Jeff Petrie to Dylan DeMello in terms of their styles of play. What I am drawing the parallel on is their importance to the hockey club. How different Joel Edmondson looked beside Brett Kulak versus how different Josh Morrissey looked beside Tucker Poolman. And this is not, I'm not blaming Tucker Poolman, but the difference in Morrissey, DeMello versus Edmonton compared to what we saw from the rest of the defense pairings, it was night and day. And much like we saw in the bubble, Huss, once Mark Scheifele left the series, a lot of the offensive weaponry was silenced. And not just in terms of production, but in terms of what they were able to generate or the lack thereof of the generation in terms of the offensive engagement. And that does not apply to Nikolai Ehlers. And no, Ehlers didn't get going the way that we thought he would. But I mean, Nikolai Ehlers won. He won the press conference on the year end. When I asked him about his health, I'm 100%, but I had a torn
labrum and a broken rib.
But 100%, I'm like, no, that's not 100%. But I appreciate the accountability again of Ehlers and his willingness to try to get things going. But for the team that was supposed to be incredibly deep up front, Huss, too many guys went quiet in that series. And that also is a lot to do with the way Montreal played in terms of keeping that blue paint a clean sheet for them and how physical a toll they were able to exact in that series.
They were boxing the Jets out at the blue line. I mean, like literally the box out happened, the step over the blue line, and you're 3 feet inside the zone and getting rubbed out on the boards. And yeah, I mean, they never generated or established anything in the middle, never mind the blue paint, the slot anywhere on that. And that was, ultimately very problematic in a series that, Connor Hellebuck kept them in, despite in some games, probably maybe they shouldn't have been.
No, you're right. And it went even deeper than that. It started with the zone exits. Like they couldn't, never mind getting to the entries, Huss. They couldn't get that, the exits part taken care of. That was a big problem. And they couldn't get the forecheck going at all. Couldn't get the zone, and their puck management, which was so exceptional against the Oilers, was so poor in that Montreal series. They literally did not give themselves a chance. And the only chance they could have had is if their special teams had been able to bail them out. And not only did the special teams not bail them out, they got outscored 6-1, 3 shorties given up, and they only scored 1 shorthanded goal of their own, which was a beauty by Adam Lowry. But you can't get 0 power play goals, give up 3 shorties, and try to make up for your lack of offense when your special teams completely let you down, which that also happened against Calgary too, Huss, right? Those were the 2 biggest things, losing Scheifele and then losing the special teams battle so dramatically. It literally did not give their goaltender a chance to even try to bail them out or steal a game where, I mean, as you mentioned in Game 4, Connor Hellebuck was the only reason that game was not a blowout and that it went to extra time to begin with. And then before you snapped your finger, there were 3 mistakes made and a backdoor one-timer that you left yourself wondering, how did that guy get the puck? How was the lane open? And how was the one-timer so wide open that you turned your head and the series was over? And you're like, how did that even happen? Like, there were 3 things that happened there. It should have started as like leaving the puck behind the net, and all of a sudden turnover out in front, slot, bang, back of the net. And you're like, okay, I guess they're shaking hands now. That's it.
Yeah, that's accurate. That's accurate.
It just is like such an incredible turn of events, and Caulfield right in the middle of everything. And I know that drove Jets fans crazy because yes, here's a guy who, the young player was, the shackles were taken off after the first 2 games, and Caulfield became that dynamic difference maker. But the biggest difference, Huss, I mean, Caulfield the other night scored his 40th goal of the season, including college, World Junior, AHL, regular season, playoffs. That's a large. We know that Billy Hanley had a large, wide berth of experiences this year as well in terms of his 50 games. But Caulfield, is just something that they don't really have a lot of game breakers, I guess. And I get it. Some people will argue that Heinola could have been a game breaker for the Jets too.
Never mind, just making a pass in his own end. I mean,
for sure. And I know a lot of people here. I want to address something with Heinola also, Huss. I know that a lot of people got wound up when Paul Maurice basically said it was an open competition and he wasn't going to be gifting those spots to Dylan Samberg and Ville Heinola. That doesn't mean they're not going to win those jobs, and it doesn't mean that those jobs are not available to them. But if you look at the history of the Winnipeg Jets, they don't go out and say, see in the fall, the job is yours. That's just not a mentality.
No, and they shouldn't. I mean, you know what? You should earn your job. But what people are concerned is,
right, are
they going to get a realistic opportunity to do that? And I certainly believe next year they will. Yeah. It's pretty hard to say that, at least in Heinola's case, that was afforded him this season. And you know what, that was their decision. And I truly believe that just from what we saw, knowing the needs, what we saw from Ville when he was on the ice, that I deduced that this obviously must be an organizational decision, and they're just listen, they know the situation that they're in, and they feel that the extra year of control, slide the ELC, is better for the team. I know Cheveldayoff said that was absolutely not the case, and I'm not suggesting that he was being less than truthful. But whatever, there's a disconnect at some point. Bottom line is, spent a lot of time on the taxi squad. It was a unique year. We know why that was, but I do understand why a lot of people, seeing the struggles of the Winnipeg Jets defense to do very simple things like just moving the puck out of their own end, would love to see Ville Heinola. But again, we were talking about men earlier, and the not just the Steinbach online manliest man competition, but also the fact that they want guys to be ready to go up, especially in playoffs against some pretty big dudes on a team like Montreal. Obviously, they didn't think Ville was the guy for the job. But back to your point, next year, yeah, you got to come in and earn it. But I think the opportunity will absolutely be there because the Jets want these guys to come in and earn jobs and show that they belong.
Yeah, and I do not see a scenario where Stanley, Samberg, and Heinola are not involved and heavily involved, and not as a seventh defenseman for any of them. I expect them to be. Oh, sorry. The only scenario I see is if one of them is moved for a more experienced defenseman with term. Otherwise, I see all three of those guys being contributors, perhaps even major contributors to this hockey team. Dylan Samberg had an excellent year. One of those guys could easily play on the right-hand side. That's why Heinola played on the right a bit with the Moose. That's why Samberg was tested on the Moose. Is it an optimal circumstance? No, but the quickest way for those guys to improve on the back end is by having them as contributors because of what they bring into the table in terms of skill set. So, man, I'm fascinated. Jake McCabe is a guy who is, we know Dougie Hamilton is the prime target, but to me, Jake McCabe's a guy who would provide a lot of things that the Jets don't have abundance of. Really smart guy, plays a physical brand of hockey, moves the puck well enough. I could see him being a target. I think Hamilton is a legit target, but the hesitancy there is, are you willing to go to the number that is required to get to Dougie Hamilton? And if you do, can you do that and also provide the raised to Neil Pionk that is $5.5 or $6 million? Because now if Dougie Hamilton is in here as a number one guy, Huss, he's running the top power play. He's on the top pairing. So now Neil Pionk, who's had 2 great years with the Jets, your ice time is reduced. You're still playing an important role in the top 4, but all of a sudden now you have 2 guys at $6 million and you have one at 8 or 9. That's the bigger issue for the Jets in terms of making all of those pieces fit. We know they're going to have a couple guys on ELC contracts, like we mentioned. Logan Stanley probably going to be in that bridge range, or mill and a half, whatever it is. And you will need to have ELC guys like Heinola and Samberg in the lineup. And to me, it goes even further. And I know that a lot of people were up in arms about the other thing was the fourth line role. David Gustafsson is going to be the Jets' fourth line center next year. He has to be.
If he earns it, Ken. They're not just going to gift him a job, remember?
He is going to win the job because of what he can already do. He can kill penalties. He is a big 6'2", 6'3" presence. He already was a man in a 19-year-old's body when he broke into the NHL. Now he's 2 years older. He's going to win that job. And the other part about Gustafsson, he has offensive ability, and he may not put eye-popping numbers out, but he makes his line mates better. He has built-in chemistry with Christian Vesalainen. He puts Vesalainen in spots where he can use that shot that we've seen at the American League level, but we haven't seen enough of at the NHL level. You have a built-in 2/3 of a line like already handed to you. So unless Vesalainen is the next Matthew Perreault on that third line with the Jets, which is also a possibility, you put him with Gustafsson, you got 2/3. And if you need special teams time, Gustafsson plays on the penalty kill, put Vesalainen on the second power play. He's got a great shot and he's got a big body. So there you solve your special teams issue. And hey, if you want to bring back Nate Thompson or Trevor Lewis, fine. You can play those guys with the two young guys on the fourth line. The biggest thing for me, Huss, that we're seeing in this Final Four, especially when it comes to fourth lines, the biggest difference, Vegas, big, strong fourth line. Yes, the Jets' fourth line did a nice job for the majority of the year. They didn't give up a lot of 5-on-5 action. They had 2 penalty killers on that line. And they had, for a long time, Matthew Perreault who played on the power play. But if you're looking at the size discrepancy between Vegas and Montreal and Winnipeg's fourth line, it's a massive difference, right? Those guys play hard, but they're not big physical guys like Reeves or Carrier or Stahl or Perry or, and Armia. I mean, we know that Armia is not a big banger, but he gets involved physically, right? I mean, he uses his body, he skates well enough, and he's got incredible hands. So I think that the Jets' fourth line will benefit from an infusion of youth. I think there's always going to be room for character players, but those character players can be 12th and 13th forwards. They don't necessarily have to be on the second.
Yeah, those guys won't be keeping the young guys out of the lineup next year. I think that is what the hope and that is what the expectation. That's a great point, Ken.
And those guys help pave the way for those young guys. And I'm not diminishing their role. Being around, of course, Jansen Harkins would have been frustrated with the lack of ice time this year, but Jansen Harkins is going to be a better hockey player in the fall because he spent time around Trevor Lewis, who won a Stanley Cup, and he spent time around Nate Thompson, who's closing in on 1,000 games, right?
Would he have been a better player if he was playing?
Well, I think he probably would have been, yes. I mean, the one of the great mysteries this year, Huss, is how, I wouldn't even call it a fall from grace, but I would love to know how this year would have turned out if Jansen Harkins doesn't pull up with a groin injury on day 1 of training camp, or not day 1, it was day 3 where the scrimmage was, where he was goal and an assist, but just absolutely flying all over the ice. And then the next day he hurt his groin, and then he was basically out of the lineup and didn't ever get back going. I mean, yes, he had a few opportunities, but he just didn't. You saw flashes all the time, but it just was a strange turn of events, Sauce. I don't have a really good explanation for it. This isn't a Sami Niku situation. This is a guy who has a great attitude, is an incredibly hard worker. So to me, I think the injuries had to play a bigger role in it than we would even know. But the biggest, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in that exit meeting, because the only signs that we saw, I remember one of the days before the playoffs started, Harkins did his post-game skate with the extra players, and then had like about a 25 minute, or I'm estimating here, everything seems long when you're waiting for the Zoom call, with Dave Lowry. And just after he did his work, he had this long conversation with Lowry. I would love to have heard what it was like. I mean, he was put on alert by Paul Maurice. What does Jansen Harkins need to do? He needs to go and win a job in this hockey team. Whereas most of us, after seeing him bumped into the top 6 the previous year, felt that he was on the verge of taking more. Like, a lot of people thought he would take the jump that Mason Appleton took this year. Instead, he became a frequent healthy scratch. So I think this is a big summer for Jansen Harkins. We know he's a hard worker. I think that he will come incredibly determined. Where he slots on the depth chart is really up to be determined. But I expect him to have a way bigger impact next year. And I'll be very curious to see where things kind of shake out. And I also think too, I mean, we look at what Josh Anderson is doing. I talked about that third line. Guy like Anderson, a guy like Alex Tuck. Can the Jets add a little bit of size? Or, I mean, Sean and I talked about this the other day. I mean, if you're the Jets, don't you consider a free agent contract for Yoel Armia? I mean, if the potential to lose Appleton to Seattle, I mean, you got a plug and play guy that works with Adam Lowry.
Well, yeah, so, you know what? And listen, we'll get to a big free agency discussion before we get to that point, and we'll know a little bit more. But before we break, and this has been awesome, Kenny, you're on fire today, and people are enjoying it. I do want to ask you, it's the 17th of June today.
Yeah.
Let's pull out the Winnipeg Sports Talk expansion-o-meter
Yes.
and take Ken Wiebe's pulse. I will give you this. We're protecting Scheifele, Wheeler, Ehlers, Connor, Dubois, Lowry for sure. Tops. Those are 6.
Kopp is your 7th. You can mark him down in pen.
Okay, well, so Kopp, there's your answer. Kopp is the 7th, which means Mason Appleton and Jansen Harkins are both available.
You got the super stumper coming for me, Huss. I already see where this is going.
Blue line, we know it's going to be Morrissey. We know it's going to be Pionk. We've got Stanley and we've got DeMello. I know both of us are thinking that I'm sure the Jets would like to ensure that neither of those guys players, but let's just for a moment assume that Ron Francis doesn't want to play ball. And he said, no, just give me your list and I'll pick a guy. To me, this is the most difficult decision. And I mean, I still think I lean towards Stanley, big picture, long term. But man, seeing what the Jets looked like without Dylan DeMello in the series against Montreal, I think probably gave pause. We won't hold you to this. This could change a number of times before we get to expansion day. But where are you at on what happens on the blue line today?
Yeah, on June 17th, I'm going to take Dylan DeMello. I think that it's a tough choice, Huss, and here's my caveat to that. I think that if the Jets lose Logan Stanley in that scenario, and I still think that there's a side deal to be had, I think the Jets go out and sign the seasoned version of Logan Stanley, who is Jamie Alexiak. So if you lose that size of that player, you sign Alexiak in free agency to play with Neil Pionk. I know some people are already ready to put Dylan Samberg on that pairing, and maybe he will be there. But I think that the Jets, I know what they've invested in Logan Stanley, Huss, and I know that they want to keep him, and they may end up going the opposite direction here. But Dylan DeMello, they made a 4-year commitment to Dylan DeMello last year. We saw Dylan DeMello play what he described himself as the best hockey of his career in round 1. We also know that Dylan DeMello spent most of the year in a mentorship role with young players like Logan Stanley. We also know that Josh Morrissey played his best hockey with Dylan DeMello. So for me, if they go out and get an Alexiak or a Dougie Hamilton, I know those are not necessarily comparable players. What I'm saying is if they go out and get a top 4 player, they augment from within. I do think that Dylan DeMello at $3 million it would be tough to replace Dylan DeMello at $3 million to find a potential top pairing guy to play with Josh Morrissey. That's my argument for Dylan DeMello. I also know, the loyalty factor is very much alive. We know the investment level in Logan Stanley is incredibly high, which I understand even Cheveldayoff made it sound like he wasn't interested in a side deal and that he would take his medicine and just lose one player. To me, I think the combination of DeMello and Stanley for a team that is already looking to upgrade its blue line, losing either one of them would be a blow. Can they fill that elsewhere? Of course they can. But
let me ask you this, Ken. Let me ask you this just on that. Does it even matter if Mason Appleton is also exposed? I mean, at $900K, the player that he's turned into under team control. I mean, I know I was looking at the guys in the Athletic that were doing their 7th mock-up of the Kraken, and 2 of the 3 had Appleton in there. Again, we've really focused on defense because of just how big the need is for those players in Winnipeg. But if you're Ron Francis and you have the choice of all 3 of those players, let's say all 3 of them were available, who are you taking?
If all 3 are available, Dylan DeMello is the first choice.
If you're Seattle?
Yeah. Because of the analytics department, I think that he would, because of his defensive capabilities and his underlying numbers and his ability to make his partner better, his salary, and I'm just saying this is by the slimmest of margins for me, Huss. I think that Mason Appleton has tremendous appeal to the Seattle Kraken, but I think for the Winnipeg Jets, it is more difficult to replace Dylan DeMello than Mason Appleton. And I mean, you're basically talking to president of the fan club is not the right term, but I expect, Mason Appleton was my breakout player for the Jets this year going into training camp. And he had an exceptional year, right? 12 goals, 25 points. And that included a couple of dry spells late. And this is a guy that, is ready to be on the penalty kill full time. He started the year, once Thompson got hurt, he was on the penalty kill, got taken off. He's ready for more role. He's better for more opportunity. We saw when the Jets were shaking things up, it's Mason Appleton getting a chance in the top 6. So I don't think for a second the Jets want to lose him either. What I think, though, Huss, is that it's because of the depth in the organization where you have a Vesalainen, you have a Harkins, you have a Gustafsson. It's a lot easier for them to replace potentially Mason Appleton than it would be to replace Dylan DeMello because of how thin the Jets are already on the right side. We heard Paul Maurice use the word stacked, which is a relative term, and I know some people were turned off by it, but the Jets are not stacked. You know where they're not stacked, Huss? On the right-hand side of the defense.
But listen, I'm asking this question not from a Jets perspective, but from a Seattle perspective. And
I think DeMello has huge interest in Seattle is what I would say is if he's available. But they would also have a massive interest in Mason Appleton.
Yeah, and I think Logan Stanley as well.
Oh,
I mean,
sure, yes.
Like, listen, I mean, the reason why, I mean, I think those players, like Dylan DeMello, he never scores. He's good in his own end. The analytics are good, helps other players, and he's $3 million a year for 3 years. Appleton or Stanley, both young players with tremendous upside under team control that you could have longer. And honestly, I mean, listen, I know Vegas went to the Cup final in the first year, but what are the Seattle Kraken trying to do? I mean, are they building for the future? Or are they trying to do what Vegas did last year? I think that would probably be part of it. Bottom line is, it is an intriguing conversation, and you can have this situation with Winnipeg and change it to the rosters of NHL teams around the league and probably crank out another half hour of content on every damn team in the league can.
Yeah, and let me also be abundantly clear. Logan Stanley is a player that I see big things on the horizon for. So I don't say this lightly. I think that the Jets could easily protect Logan Stanley. I think that he has the potential to be a top 4 defenseman. We know he was sheltered more this year. We know he's got a big shot. We know he's got very good puck skills for a big guy. We know how far if his skating goes from last year to this year and takes an incremental leap like it did in the year prior, Logan Stanley is going to be an impact player. He has that physical edge that the Jets don't have an abundance of on the back end either. So, I mean, that's the beauty, Huss. The debate at that table would be exceptional because there are important qualities for all of those players, right? That's the problem. This is not a cut and dried case. This is a case where you can make a solid argument for all 3 players. So that's why, I mean, man, that debate room, I don't think for a second that third spot is in pen. It's still in pencil, even for the Winnipeg Jets. They have a month to decide, and you could be, the whiteout or the eraser is going to get a lot of, like, there'd be people, you'd be waking up in the middle of the night one day thinking, I've got this figured out. And then the next night you wake up at 3 a.m. and say, I completely changed my mind. So I think it's going to be an incredibly difficult choice. That's why I also think that based on where the Jets are in their window, in terms of their contention window, Huss, I know there would be a lot of teams that say, just take your medicine and lose one good player. Depending on what like you said, what Ron Francis is looking for, you may be more apt to sacrifice some futures than your present when it comes to A, the defense core, and B, they want to have Appleton because they need Appleton on that third line in order to, take a step forward. You made the final 8 this year. If you want to get into the final 4 and have another chance, you want all 3 of those guys. So that's why I think there still would be, Kevin Cheveldayoff isn't out. He's not going to be out here and saying, "Oh, I'm keeping all these guys. Ronnie, come on down and squeeze everything you can out of our organization." But much like they did last time with Vegas, there was a cost to that. Of course, we know that. We know what Nick Suzuki's doing, and we know that every time Nick Suzuki's name gets brought up, the 13th overall pick gets brought up because that pick once belonged to the Winnipeg Jets. So, given the challenges at the second line center position, that conversation is going to continue happening for quite some time. But I do see there being some maneuverability for the Jets in terms of trying to make it fit. But I mean, if Ron Francis is holding steady like Kelly McCrimmon and George McPhee did, they may just have to take a deep swallow and take what they take and lose what they lose. But I still would, if I had to bet today, Huss, on the old cool bet, I'm betting on a side deal rather than one of those 3 guys being available.
Right on. Wiebe, listen, this has been amazing. We went quite long, but I wound you up and got you going quite a bit.
Doesn't take much.
No, it certainly doesn't. What are you and the King of the Trampoline, Master of the Headband, Sean Reynolds have coming up with Kenny and Rennie? You guys getting after it after the next Habs Vegas game? Or
Yeah.
When will we see the wit and wisdom of the two of you?
For sure. So just quick programming note, we're kind of debating as terms of keeping the Friday show going. I think that because we did the 2 pop-up shows last week after the exit interviews, we're going to pause the long form show for the time being, but we'll have a couple of pop-ups around free agency and the draft and the expansion draft. But right now we're going to hone in on, for the remainder of the playoffs, we'll be doing post games as far as this series with Montreal and Vegas, and then we'll continue with the Stanley Cup final just because the engagement level has been high. We saw some of your followers snuck into the old chat room last night as well. Great to see them down there. So we're going to keep that going for now, and we'll keep everybody posted on the other shows. But we're kind of letting people breathe. The people like you, Huss, who've gone back to rewatch those games and are feeling there was, I'm going to tell you, there was a lot of angst in the chat room after game 1. I think people were going for the traditional, the traditional venting of the Jets, Kenny and Rennie show, and they came to see Vegas and Montreal, and a lot of them were unhappy. But by game 2, they had a better idea of what to expect. So much more lively and contained chat room for game 2 as compared to game 1, which is a little bit out of control. I needed the chief technical officer muting a few people after game 1, but we did give them a little bit wider berth than normal. But we hope that the folks will continue to check it out. We'll see them Friday night, probably around 10:30ish, with the game starting an hour earlier in Montreal. I think that'll be a benefit to keeping a few more folks around, and they're enjoying some great weather and some great Father's Day weekend. I mean, no gatherings except maybe outside, I guess, but enjoy that weather while you can and keep enjoying the hockey.
We all know why this is happening, because this 9 a.m. Friday programming does not work very well with 8 a.m. tee times or 36 holes in a day. So, but you know what? Listen, I respect it because you're still getting it done. You're still doing it. We're just working everything in. So follow Wiebe's World for the latest updates on the hashtag Manitoba Golf Tour 2021. Maybe we'll even get an ace mixed in there. Who knows? You're probably due. It's been a little while. But anyways, listen, man, we'll look forward to the show. And this was a lot of fun. And if we're able to have conversations like this, June 17th, just still with the playoffs hanging around, how are things going to be when we get into a couple more weeks, finishing up the playoffs, going into the draft, expansion draft, and whatnot? Lots for us to talk about here in Winnipeg Sports Talk, and of course, with you and Reynolds. Thanks for doing this, dude. We'll catch up again very soon.
My pleasure, Huss. Thanks for having me. And you know, I have a few Blue Jays thoughts on what's been happening on the triple crown front and the fire gas can bullpen activity. I've been enjoying the Alec Manoah starts, but there's been a lot.
Everything other than the bullpen.
It's also an attack on fundamental baseball, Huss. It's a flat out attack. We got errors. We have poor base running. But it's fun. You know this. It's fun to be a Blue Jays fan again because they're an exciting team. They are finding new ways to lose on an almost daily basis, but they're a fun team to watch. They got some great offensive talent. Can't wait for Pearson to get back up in the show. And man, it's the animation was up in full force with Ross Stripling yesterday as well. You know, he's quite embarrassed by his showing up Joe Panic, I guess. But I think that was
not a good look for chicken strips.
No, and again, especially a guy who's very calm demeanor, especially, right? He's the calm demeanor king. But man, we have lots to talk about at all times, Huss, and it won't be long before there'll be NFL talk, and there'll be more. We'll have scheduled things to discuss, but. Always enjoy chatting
Bomber season too. I mean, that's
exactly.
The other
and that's
great
news, right? Great
listen,
news.
We could go 3 or 4 hours right now, really, if we want to get into it. But
also, sorry, I'm with you in terms of Brooks, and what I also want to say is if they called the agent and the agent gave the thumbs down to the agent of DeChambeau, because that pairing needs to happen on the weekend. Yeah. Let the stars line up that those two guys are going head to head on Saturday or Sunday, because as we like to say, give the people what they want. Let's go.
Let's let it happen. And I can tell you another golf update for Breezy Ben. Brooks did get up to -4. He's given one back. He is at 3 under par along with Xander Schauffele. Patrick Rogers right now, top of the leaderboard, -4. And man, we're going to have tons of primetime golf tonight too, Ken, because this is at Torrey Pines. They had the fog delay today. We should be good watching live golf till about 10 o'clock tonight, so I can't wait. Let's do this again very soon, my man. Thanks for the time. People loved it.
Appreciate you having me. Have a great weekend, my man. Cheers.
There he is, Ken Wiebe at Wiebe's World. Kenny and Rennie, if you're with us. I just saw Phyllis, I say, was very enjoying Ken's visit. Make sure that you're subscribed to the Kenny and Rennie channel and check out the boys after the game tomorrow night. Many birthday wishes for Ken Wiebe, as always. That would come in. Lots of people loving it. And I got to give a shout out to John Ohm. Great show, Winnipeg Sports Talk. My first one. I like it. John, make sure you hit that red subscribe button and join us. We're here every day, Monday to Friday. And if you missed the show, you can always get it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you are listening on the podcast, hook your boys up. Give a little rating, and a 5-star rating and a review would be greatly appreciated. Well, tonight, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to be cranked back, reclined, watching the U.S. Open and all the action. I can't think of anything better to go with that than a couple pizzas and some wings. And for that, we go to our friends at Boston Pizza. Of course, we're counting down the days until we can get back into the Boston Pizza lounges with each other, sharing some schooners and some great pizzas. But for the meantime, we'll settle for the game day meal with the Meteor Pizza, the spicy pierogi pizza, and the 2-for, the case of those amazing BP wings. Also, if you're not looking for something that big, check out the Pizza Flights. Really, really cool. 3 specialty pizzas, 6-inch versions, 3 different dips. A little bit of around the world of the Boston Pizza menu all in one. BostonPizza.com. Order online. Call your local store for delivery and takeout right now. And let's keep on supporting our restaurants while they are shut down for dining in. Aikens Lake, of course. Can't wait to get out there a little later on this season. World-class fly-in fishing lodge right here in Manitoba. Find out more at aikenslake.com or hit them up on Twitter at Aikens Lake, and maybe we'll see you out there a little later on for some world-class fishing on the water in less than 2 hours from the province of Manitoba. And a shout out to our friends at Assiniboia Downs. A wild one last night, and I'll get Remis in for this because we both had a nice win early on, and we're getting ready for races 6 and 7. And I know Remis was tuned in live on the YouTube channel, and we had a bit of a mishap, Reem, which meant that race 6 and 7 ended up being returned. So we've got a couple extra bucks to be betting either on the weekend or on Monday.
Yeah, I was tuned in. I have a lot of fun hanging out with everyone in the Assiniboia Downs YouTube. If you want winners, I'm like 5 of my last. I think I'm 6 of my last 7.
How did you do last night? Fill us in.
I went 2 for 2 on the races that ran, and then they had that canceled one, so I was doing pretty well. And then I was all fired up, and the power went out. They didn't have any lights, and they just can't. The horses were tightening up, so they said, you know what, let's cancel. They put them in the stable. We're trying to stay loose, running, walking around. But then,
it's like a starting pitcher, getting an inning in, and then, having a 3-hour rain delay and not wanting to put him back on the bump, I guess.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. So I don't know how it works, but I had some money left over because my bets got canceled, so I started betting on Emerald Downs outside Seattle.
Any luck there? Are you dominating the other races, the other courses as well?
It's a bit tougher. I'm not familiar with all the horses at Emerald Downs. I'm just learning. So
I got my first triactor of the season for the duel at the Downs, which was a nice one, and had a couple returns. So I'll be ready for the weekend, and we'll be ready for Monday. Of course, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, live racing at Assiniboia Downs. asdowns.com for all the information, but where you really want to go if you want to hang with us and bet on the races is hpibet.com. Every day, 7 days a week, racing from around the world, which you can bet on and watch. And right now, while there's no fans in Assiniboia Downs, fire up the ASD YouTube channel and make a little wager at HPI Bet and enjoy it all from the comfort of your own home. Can't wait for Monday. Big thanks to Assiniboia Downs for their support of the program. Remo, let's get to the Cool Bet lines for today. And listen, we all know that this is one of the biggest weeks, the majors for golf, one of my favorite betting weeks of the year. I've been entirely focused on the golf leading into tee-off right now. We do have still some potentials for the round 1 betting. There's still matchups for the afternoon rounds. And I'm looking, they've also still got updated live U.S. Open numbers. Brooks Koepka right now, 5-1 to win the tournament. Shoffley 9-1. John Rahm is still at 11. Bryson DeChambeau, DJ at 17 as well. So you've got a bunch of numbers in there. You can check it all out for the U.S. Open. Meanwhile, tonight's game in the National Hockey League, the Lightning, minus 127 favorites on the road at the Coliseum against the New York Islanders, plus 113 for the Islanders at home. And in the NBA tonight, one game, it is the Brooklyn Nets looking to bounce the Milwaukee Bucks. Bucks at home, minus 5.5 point favorites. It'll be KD and injured James Harden, no Kyrie Irving tonight. Of course, you can bet on all the games at coolbet.com. And if you've never been there before, use promo code WST for a 100% bonus up to $200 on your first deposit. You can also check our tweets from the at Sports Talk WPG Twitter feed. We'll have a link daily coming up out after the show. Remo, you got a feel about this game tonight? The Coliseum is going to be rocking. It's been interesting to see how much that line has dropped. Tampa was a much bigger favorite when it opened. I think a lot of people are slowly but surely believing in the New York Islanders, despite their loss in Game 2 of the series.
Who's the Islanders coach again? Barry
Trotz, the Trotz train, all aboard.
What does Barry Trotz do? Win games? I'm taking the Islanders. That's simple.
I would love it. That's going to be a great scene. Man, the atmosphere. I know we've talked a lot about Vegas with the full house, but holy smokes, has the Nassau County Coliseum been incredible over the past few weeks as the Islanders have got to their second consecutive NHL Final Four, a rematch against the Lightning. And now, last year they lost in 6. This year they've got the split coming home. They'll look to get a big win tonight, and we'll look forward to it. I mentioned the underdogs just quickly to wrap up from yesterday. We talked a lot about the Habs' big win. Remo, in the NBA, if you had just parlayed the 3 underdogs in the playoffs last night on the money line, I can't imagine how big the odds would have been, because the Hawks were, I want to say, 7-point underdogs. The Clippers were 8-point underdogs without Kawhi Leonard. Paul George really did morph into playoff P for the first time, dropping 35 points in a huge road win for the Clippers. And then, dude, this Philly-Atlanta game was absolutely bananas. They had a 26-point lead with 3 minutes left in the third quarter and lost the game. I mean, that is the biggest blown lead in a long time in an NBA playoff game, and a tough look for Doc Rivers, who had his Clippers last year blow 19 and 21-point leads in the playoffs, but this one took the cake. And man, to do it in such an important game at this point in the series could be devastating for Philly. Joel Embiid was rolling early, but just did not have any gas in the tank in the fourth quarter. And how about that, Remis? The Atlanta Hawks could be going to the conference finals and potentially all the way to the NBA finals. Don't think a lot of people had that on the card even a month or two ago.
No, and Trae Young for them emerging as a superstar. Watch out for this young stud. So pretty cool. Atlanta. I can't remember the last time they were any good.
No.
I can't, like early 90s. I have no idea. So
the coolest thing about Trae Young, I mean, he'll always be connected to Luka Doncic, who has turned into one of the greatest players on the planet very early. And Young's in that conversation earlier. And you know, in the NBA, when they do trades on draft day, the teams actually have to select the players first, and they get the hat of the wrong team, and then later on their rights are traded. No idea why they haven't rectified that. But yeah, it was Luka Doncic going to the Hawks, Trae Young going to the Mavericks. That trade happened, and both teams look pretty happy with their young players. Absolute studs right now. But Trae Young still in the playoffs and still getting it done right now. We'll see if KD can lead the Nets to the conference finals tonight with a win in Milwaukee. What else is going on tonight, Reem? Anything else that you need to get off your chest before we finish up another fun show here on the station?
There were a couple notes. I guess we can get to, we went pretty long with Ken. I wanted to go through this NHL Power or NHLPA Power poll where they polled all the players and asked them who their favorite best dressed player was. But I figured you'd want to mention Madden announcing their cover for this year.
They the two goats.
Previewed with the goats. Patrick Mahomes, is he the youngest person to be named a GOAT ever? I think Simone Biles actually maybe is younger than him. But in football, I would say Patrick Mahomes. is definitely
Tiger got to be GOAT status pretty darn early.
Yeah, that's
Mahomes
true.
is now 24, 25 right now. He's got the MVP. He's got a Super Bowl. He's got all the numbers. Listen, we're going to get into some NFL talk when we get closer to camp. This is going to be a great season, and I think Mahomes is going to be absolutely possessed after the way the Chiefs lost in the Super Bowl. The line's been rebuilt. They've added some pieces to areas of great concern coming out of that loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and all I want is a rematch against Brady one more time in the Super Bowl. It should be great. But yes, pretty cool Madden cover. They did the ad with the big goat and the baby goat coming out of the barn, and now Brady and Pat Mahomes will be on the cover of Madden. And even though often I'll buy the game and only play it a few times and then get into hockey or other games, I'll certainly be purchasing this one again. And usually the games, Reem, I just buy online now, but this is the one game where you kind of like to have the cover, the MVP edition. There they are, the two Super Bowl quarterbacks from February back in Tampa.
Yeah, I used to be all about buying the games and having the disc, but I just buy them on the console now. I realized, Huss, that I am way too lazy to get up and change the game. It is so much easier just having them on my PlayStation and not having to change the discs. So I stopped buying the discs. It's way easier. And then I have to get up and leave the house.
No, I'm with you, but I wouldn't mind just for this one with my guy Mahomes on the cover. Shout out to our guy, Sean Lishka. The Gitch is here. Don't forget, folks, I think we've got one more day of voting for Steinbach's Manliest Man. And if you do ever listen to, I'm not familiar with it, but 107 Country in Steinbach, I'll be on the morning show discussing what makes a man, I can't even say this with a straight face, what makes a manly man. And our guy Gitch, Rima, why don't you go down to Sean L and just make sure if the people that are watching on YouTube can see the great photo that Sean has put up. And for those thinking that Sean, is one of these guys that just did like a wacky, funny picture to, post for the Manliest Man, that's not a special picture. That's not even dressed up. I mean, this is dude 24/7, 365. And that's why he's the best. So you can give him a follow on Twitter, Gitch Lishka, for some funny stuff. But yeah, go to the Manliest Man thing at Steinbach Online. Click vote. You just got to make sure you're a human. You can do it every hour. If you're bored while you're watching golf today, throw a boy. The Fernando army is strong. He's been growing big time. So we've got to try and get Gitch back in there right at the buzzer. That's going to basically do it for us, Raymond. Tomorrow should be fun. We'll be able to get into some more U.S. Open talk, a little more on the playoffs, of course, heading into the weekend. Ken brought up the Blue Jays. I do want to spend a little bit more time on the Jays. And, of course, we have our good friend, one Jim Toth, coming back on. And can't think of a better way to get into the weekend than JT coming on. It will be the definition of a fun Friday show on Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Oh yeah, Jim always has well-reasoned takes that aren't far-fetched at all that everyone can get on board with. So I know Jim is going to be great.
Each one, let's go. Gotta walk the walk and talk the talk. Thanks, guys. You got it. Jim Toth is the ex of Carrie Underwood. Ooh, that's interesting.
Hey, what did you say, by the way? I was wondering, what did you say were the qualities for a manly man on that radio station? Do I just have to tune in?
Well, you're going to have to well, no. I mean, first of all, he said, so what did you think about this, the Steinbach Online Manliest Man competition? And I said, well, I mean, obviously, I thought it was a joke. I mean, I'm still not really sure if this is supposed to be serious or not, but for the purpose of conversation, let's go forward. And I was basically trying to position it to support Gitch on it. So when they asked me what a manly man is, I said, well, listen, guys, I don't really care about your axe picture or your big fish that you caught. To me, a manly man is one that has the self-confidence to be themselves and brighten others' days, which of course Sean does. So we sort of went down that creep. But as I said, I don't know whether we could get away with a Manliest Man competition in Winnipeg Sports Talk.
No.
I know you'd be worried that we'd get canceled for that.
Yeah, you can't do that. We have to include everyone.
Hey, listen, it's 2021. We're on the internet. We go by one motto on this program. DGC, baby. DGC.
What's that?
Don't get canceled.
Oh, I'm afraid of getting we got a Twitter account with like 12,000 followers. I am so afraid every time I send a tweet. Am I going to get canceled if I send this? I'm my biggest fear. I'm afraid of saying stuff on the show because if I say the wrong thing, someone's going to clip it and I'm done. I'm canceled. I won't be able to leave the house.
Maybe that'll be our first. Maybe that'll be our first custom Winnipeg Sports Talk T-shirt.
Yeah. Speaking of that, the merch store, it's coming soon. So store.winnipegsportstalk.com. Sign up, put your email in there, and we will let you know about the big grand opening. So,
yeah,
stay
exactly.
tuned.
We've got some stuff coming. Want to make sure the stuff's all good. We're going to be getting that in a few days, and then we'll be able to show you some pictures of everything, launch it. But where was that again? Because people can go and just put in their email, and then as soon as we're live, Remo, they'll get a notification and they can get on and be the first ones.
Exactly. So store.winnipegsportstalk.com. There is a link in the chat. And if you're listening to the podcast, you can type that in.
Eric, gotta have Wiebe's shocked face on a shirt.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. At what point, actually, this is a great thing that Eric brought up, and maybe this is an idea that, will take us to great fame, fortune, and riches. But how soon are we, Remo, from being technologically able to put a GIF on a T-shirt?
Actually, my son has a T-shirt where, like, if you turn it, it looks like a different thing. So isn't that kind of like the early GIF?
Well, yes, exactly.
Like, you remember those?
Is right.
Remember those McDonald's hockey cards? You like looked at him and like would be like Pavel Bure like jumping over the goalie. I have them here. I can bring them out. But like, I think you could do that. Or
that would be amazing. That would mean the Ken Wiebe GIF into a shirt that changes depending on how you're looking at it.
Yeah.
Eric, you're giving us some good ideas. You're giving us some very, very good ideas. Gitch is saying, yes, Fernando's legion of supporters is unmatched. Well, we're going to try and get the WST Army at least pumping you up. And who knows? Like, I don't even know. Did they just finish the voting and that guy wins? Or then do they have some finalists for a man-off?
Man-off.
They bring...
Hey, actually, speaking of man, we were talking about how much the Jets love saying players are men. David Gustafson was drafted. He was a 19-year-old and of the man's body. So we put that on the man counter from Ken.
And someone said Jim Toth believes that he is the manliest man. We'll definitely talk about that with him tomorrow, amongst many other things. Great show today. Awesome stuff with Justin Dunk right off the bat. Love talking CFL. We'll have much more of that as we get closer to training camps and the upcoming season. We'll also check in with the Bombers as soon as we have information on ticketing policies, how things are going to work. We'll have that for you here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. And then, of course, Wiebe, man, we wound him up today. He was he was getting after it. All sorts of great content on the playoffs right now. And then we went down the rabbit hole of the Winnipeg Jets offseason and the expansion draft that you're just popping in right now. Folks, if you have there's Samuel22. Sam, good luck to the Habs. Big win last night. Great to see you still here after that round. Hit that like button, folks, if you wouldn't mind, on your way out, if you haven't already. Tell a friend about Winnipeg Sports Talk, whether it's showing them how to download the podcast or joining us on YouTube, and make sure you've hit that red subscribe button. Big thanks to all of our sponsors, PolicyMe.com. Don't forget, if you get there, make sure when they ask you how you heard about PolicyMe.com, hit the podcast. And Nick and Nikki DQ, Father's Day just around the corner. Any of the 4 DQ stores, or online or on Instagram at DQ Manitoba. And you get that Father's Day DQ ice cream cake ordered for Dad in time for the weekend. Of course, Royal Sports, another great spot to shop for Dad for Father's Day. Not AutoCorp, Little Brown Jug. You can order for Dad online at littlebrownjug.ca. Breezy Bend, Boston Pizza, Aikens Lake, Assiniboia Downs, and CoolBet.com. We'll be back tomorrow, 1 o'clock, with Jim Toth and much more on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Folks, enjoy another gorgeous day in southern Manitoba, and we'll see you tomorrow on WST. Have a great night.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.